I think we're ready to call this meeting to order with a roll call vote, roll call attendance, please.
Sure. Commissioner Emerson? Here. Commissioner Franz? Here. Bliss?
Here.
Nelson?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Meyer?
Here.
Mayor Clark?
Here.
And Chairperson Montague.
Here. The first item is application sketch plan, location McChesney Minor Subdivision Lot 2, zone residential and future development. Applicant Chris Hawkins, DBA Alpine Planning LLC. Owner Four Winds LLLP and estate of Bernadine C. Endicott. Do I need to go into the location of the property? Do I need to read that into the record? We're good? That's enough? All right, here we go. TJ, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Excellent. Good evening. Can everybody hear me? Sure, I'm trying to grow my voice a little bit better for those in the back of the room. Okay.
Previously, you the microphone.
Did everybody hear me?
So thank you, Chair, Commission. What we have in front of you, as you mentioned, is a sketch plan for the Four Winds subdivision. Press it. Next slide. We're going to be trying something a little new, a little bit of a presentation this evening too, to help go through the staff report. And for those, I believe it's showing on Zoom too, so let's try to help the presentation a little bit. So first, the project is generally located east of, north of and adjacent and east of Terrace Drive, east of Highway 50. Through this slide in there for everyone's information, just the general process that we're going to be going through, procedures of a hearing. So we'll go through the staff report, questions from the commission of staff, and the applicant will give a presentation. Then the public hearing will be open, and that's where public comments can be shared. And then we'll close public comment and move to planning commission discussion, deliberation, and onto a motion. So we'll just kind of go through that. So first, staff report. Starting off with some background, the owners, as you mentioned, are Four Winds Ranch 1 LLP and Bernadine, the estate of Bernadine Endicott. The property includes Lot 2 McChesney subdivision, which is 33.09 acres, and a portion of the Endicott property being referred to as the Endicott property. It's the area in white dashed outline there that encompasses approximately 9.95 acres for a total project area of 43.04 acres. Press the next. The zoning of the property, it has two zone districts right now. One is low density residential there to the west, and then the eastern portion at 9.95 acres is zoned for future development. All application materials have been submitted per the code, and the public hearing has been noticed as required by the Ridgway Municipal Code as well. So getting into the actual project, just a quick summary. This graphic that you're seeing is the proposed layout. It includes about 20 single-family residential homes with a range of lot sizes. We'll get into that in a little bit when we get into the analysis. The internal lollipop that we're calling it, roadway. You can see it comes in one spot, loops around, and comes back out. There's also 12.74 acres of open space being provided. It's on the west side, and the Terrace Drive bisects it. I guess you could say it's on both sides of Terrace Drive. Well, Terrace Drive is right of way, and that squiggly line that goes down towards Highway 50 on that top left of this slide is a hiking / mountain biking trail that's being proposed. Then we'll get into both of these in a little bit too, but the water service lines or water main lines are proposed to be extended, as well as some improvements to the water system. And OWTS is on-site wastewater treatment system, so septic system is being proposed. We'll get into those a little bit more. So these are the elements that we're going to go through step by step here. So I won't dwell on these, but next question. So first, the master plan goals. The staff report goes into each of these in detail, as well as identifies which goals and policies are being met by the application. So in general, the density is 0.1 to 1 dwelling unit per acre for the master plan, and the gross density is 0.46 units per acre. The maximum height is 2.5, and that appears to be able to be met. Again, there are some things that we're going to be looking at that cannot be determined at this time. That's simply a factor of process, not an indication that the application is inadequate. So I'll try to identify when in the process those will be reviewed. So building height would be at building permit time. The primary uses are single-family homes with some supported uses. So the uses proposed in this application are consistent with the master plan. And then, as I mentioned, the goals and policies are detailed in the staff report. But two things I just wanted to bring to the attention is that the project is located within a low concentration area, and there's also some significant steep slope area that staff is requesting through the comments and the conditions be overlaid on the project in future submittals. Make sure that we're not impacting those significantly. Guess I'd just be remiss to say, sorry, it's not on there. The parcel is identified as rural neighborhoods as the land use classification in the future land use map. So next we look at land uses. So land uses proposed. So currently the entire parcel included in the sketch plan is vacant. They are proposing, as I mentioned, 20 single-family residential lots ranging from 2.97 acres all the way down to 0.99 acres. With an average lot size of 1.17 acres. So that's significant there. The proposed land uses are allowed in the R district, which is a major component at this moment, trying to make sure that the proposed uses are allowed in the zone district. The application is proposing accessory dwelling units. They're encouraged. There is no limit on the ADUs in the proposal. So when we start talking about gross versus net density and impacts, that becomes an important factor. Now, ADUs do not count towards density. Number of units of acres, simply by definition, it's accessory to. But I think it's just important for the commission to understand that if there are 20 single-family residential homes plus 20 accessory dwelling units, evaluating it based on the worst-case scenario, if you will, that has an impact on the services, so road, the infrastructure, water, sewer, things like that. So we did want to just at least bring that to your attention as potential impacts. Open space, as I mentioned, 12.74 acres are being dedicated as open space, and that trail is being provided as well down the hillside to Highway 550. Press the next. So dimensional standards. When we look at subdivision plats, we have to make sure that all of the dimensional standards that are required for that underlying zone district are being met, in this case, the R district. So what you see here on the table is the standard, the dimensional standard on the left column. The middle column is what is required by the code, and where we're able to identify what's being provided in the column on the right. So lot width, most of those are all being met. But some of them we're not able to identify at the moment because they're not dimensioned on the site. I'm sorry, on the sketch plan. So we would need those dimensions on future submittals. The minimum lot size is 6,000 square feet. They're well over that with just under an acre as their minimum lot size. Lot coverage, again, 50%. So that's how much can be covered with building footprint, driveway, covered porches, things of that nature. And what they're proposing is what they're referring to as a maximum disturbance area of 10,000 square feet. That doesn't mean it's all going to be paved or covered in footprint. You know, let the applicant speak a little bit more to that during their presentation. But for the purposes of this, right now, the maximum lot coverage of 50% is being met on all properties where we're able to determine that. Again, minimum front setbacks, rear setbacks, side setbacks, they all are being met at the moment. And that's simply because some of them are identified and we just have to determine those through subsequent processes. So again, not a concern necessarily that they're not able to be met, given the large lot sizes. Structure height, again, as I mentioned earlier, it's something that we'll, have to determine through the process and at the time of building permit. Again, nothing is suggesting that it can't be met at this time. Next analysis area is access. So access to the subdivision, as we mentioned, is from Terrace Drive. It's of note that Terrace Drive only has one access point currently. It's Highway 55. And this project would, I get into it a little bit. So internal circulation, what they're proposing is a 24 foot wide roadway within a 60-foot right of way. And we'll get a little bit more into the road stuff in a couple slides here. The cul-de-sac and second access point. So as I mentioned, it's technically like a lollipop, but and it's not really a cul-de-sac, but it's functioning as a cul-de-sac. So we were applying that standard to it, and since it's over 500 feet, the subdivision itself requires a second point of access, and that's something that we've talked about with the applicant, and we'll need to work through identifying the best location for that, and we'll want to coordinate with the fire department on those access points of egress as well through the subsequent reviews. Access onto Highway 550. This development will likely trigger improvements to the Highway 550 intersection. It's a CDOT highway, therefore they would be pulled in. It's their jurisdiction. Not to get into the details too much, but we don't know at the moment. However, CDOT was, we did have preliminary initial conversations with CDOT on this topic. We would anticipate that with 20 new units, it would potentially warrant a new access permit. We haven't seen the current access permits, so don't really know. But we would address a lot of those issues, the access components to Highway 550. The applicant might actually know that already. And we'll address those through the review of the preliminary plat. So roadway treatment. The code, Ridgway Municipal Code does require paved streets on all public roads. Gravel roads are being requested. And that's given the rural nature and minimum traffic that's going to be on the internal circulation roads to the subdivision. Staff is agreeable to that request for those reasons as well. However, at the same time, pedestrian connections. So staff is agreeable to road treatment not being paved. However, we want to ensure that safe and adequate pedestrian connections are made through the subdivision to adjacent infrastructure as well. And so that's one of the discussion points that staff anticipates having with the applicant in subsequent discussions and reviews. I talk a little, I think the staff report goes into more detail on that, on those specific items as well. Thank you. So parking, the Ridgway Municipal Code does require 2 off-street parking spaces per single-family home, and then for the ADUs, 1 additional space. So therefore, again, playing the worst-case scenario, since it's not limited to the number of ADUs, 3 spaces would be provided for each lot, and there is, at least again at this point, we're not concerned that those 3 spaces would be able to be provided off-site, off-street, given the size of the property, the lots. So moving into the last analysis area is utilities. So first, water service. Oh, shoot, that's the wrong info. Look it up. It sure is. I apologize for that. Let me just run over here. So there is an existing water main in Terrace Drive that would be tapped into. And there's a previous note on the McChesney minor subdivision plat that would require this development to improve the water service and water system and supply out there. The proposal is to add a second water tank to the current one to ensure adequate water fire flows and water service pressure. You probably have seen through the staff review comments that we're concerned that that's not going to be adequate, nor is it a comprehensive solution. So staff does have some concerns, and we'll work through those, or are comfortable working through those with the applicant, provided that the comments in the staff review letter are adequately addressed. So then, as far as sewer service, this property is problematic to extend the sewer to. And so there's an interim solution or request for OWTS, on-site wastewater treatment systems, also known as septic systems. That would be, staff is agreeable to, with the caveat that there'd be a note on the plat requiring this property and subsequent property owners who would purchase each lot would would join any type of financing or financial funding. Sure, I got my notes right here. District or entity to extend those services in the future. So one thing that we're, at least at this point, it's very early in that process and analysis, but we're thinking that the general improvement district might make sense to extend the services up there. And so there's going to be a note of plat that at such point that happens, this development would participate in that, both financially and make sure that the services are extended to it. So the OWTS, the septic system, would go away eventually. So the OWTS is an interim solution for right now. Okay. So with all of that analysis, again, as I mentioned, there's staff report that goes into each of those in greater detail, and then the staff review comment letter dated August 10th, we did include 35 comments. And I should mention that the document itself is dated September 10th. That was a mistake by me.
Just to see if we're paying attention.
Yep, that's right. And the chair called me out on it today. So good job, you win the prize. It's a big star for the day. You know, and it's important because it's in the motion, the letter dated September, it says August 10th in the motion, which is correct, but the letter itself is dated September 10th. So those are one and the same, the one that we're referring to. So we did review what was submitted and provided those comments on August 10th. Subsequent revised plans were submitted on August 16th and 22nd. We've had good conversations with the applicant, but we have not been able to review those subsequent submittals in time for this evening. So we do, though, feel comfortable that with the staff report, we recommended to continue down the process, provided that the comments and findings identified in that August 10th letter are met. And that they would be adequately addressed prior to the preliminary plat being submitted. So again, it's somewhat consistent with what we've been doing before. We're approving with a recommendation to approve with conditions to address comments prior to a subsequent submittal. And the reason I say all that too is that in this packet, we provided you with those two application submittals dated August 16th and the 22nd, but those are, we have, again, staff has not had the opportunity to review those. So the comments are based on the original submittal. So then we have received a number of public comments. 20 comments were received prior to the agenda going out last Friday, and those were attached to the staff report. 3 additional comments were received after the application was, the packet was sent out to you all and were not included in there. However, they've been sent to you all and uploaded to the Dropbox subsequently. The 3 that came in were from Ann Mellick, David Berger, and Anthony, apologize, I'm butchering names. Egoff? Thank you. So those are the 3 that we're aware of that were forwarded. So with all of that, Preston, if you don't mind going a couple of slides, move to the staff recommendation. So staff does recommend that the town of Ridgway Planning Commission approve the 4-wind staff sketch plan incorporating the findings and comments discussed in the staff report, and then specifically in that letter dated, supposed to be dated August 10th. So, and then we have a recommended motion here for you as well. That's in the staff report. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you all might have. And the applicant, I know, is here to give a presentation as well.
Does anyone who is currently present on the planning commission have any questions or comments?
I do. TJ, can you tell us, or staff in general, tell us why, or whether or not you considered that this parcel is outside the initial growth boundary, whether you took that into consideration?
Well, I don't think
Did you not notice that the land use map, the future land use map?
no.
If I may, we did notice that it falls within the town boundary, but it doesn't fall within what's characterized as the initial growth boundary. So appreciate you pointing that out. I did take note of that, but I don't think we noted it in the staff report or anything to that effect. But yeah, let the record reflect that it doesn't fall within the initial growth boundary.
Yeah, I just think that's a really key point when you look at all the issues at hand. So I'm just curious about that.
So I've got a question on this GID. How does that work, and when would that actually be implemented? Is it kind of seems off in the distance and might not ever happen. So
I think that's a very fair question, concern, and comment. So, and I'm going a little outside of my area, so I might have Preston to help me if I need some more specifics. But in general, this property is not able to be served by the existing sewer mains. And so there would have to be significant investment in public infrastructure to extend sewer service up to this area, as well as other areas of town too, that we've been talking about for quite a bit of time. So the idea is that at such point, the services that, in order to get sewer services up to this area would be a larger effort and would be reasonably placed on this developer itself. And so there would be a larger effort, and that's where a general improvement general improvement district, GID, would come in that would essentially levy a tax on all impacted properties that the town could bond off of, complete the infrastructure, and then through that mill levy, pay that bond off. So that is one of many, many options. And I don't believe that there's been adequate evaluation to understand if that's the best financing method. But it's the one that, when we just generally think about it, seems to make potentially the most sense. And so that's, you are very correct that it may never happen. There's no mandate, no requirement for it to happen or timeline for it to happen. So I think I wrote over to Preston to see if you might want to say.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay. And then I did have another question in regards to the elk concentration in there in the wintertime. So that's being referred to CPW to comment on. Is that the?
There's a letter.
There's a letter in the packet that hasn't been reviewed by staff yet. That's a response from CPW.
Okay.
And if I may though, through the sketch plan process, there's not a referral component to it. So we would refer the application to CPW and others, including CDOT, through the preliminary plat process. So that would be the formal way to get that.
Okay.
If you guys are good for now, oh, go ahead, Russ.
So we were also talking about referring out to CDOT to address the highway itself. Is there upon to actually address any potential concerns with the road itself? This terrace road. I did see that as a comment from several folks.
Yeah.
That's concerned who was actually.
Sure. So the short answer is it depends. But with this, the preliminary plat, a traffic study would be more required. And typically that type of a study would identify warrants and improvement needs. So in general, if a development warrants, so warrants is in, because of that development, there are improvements needed, it would be on that developer to make those improvements. So the town has a policy, and I think it's in the code, that development pays its own way.
Right.
So
Who would
again-
actually do the traffic study? Would that be part of CDOT's, since
No.
it's not really the highway?
No, correct. So the impact of the development on Terrace Drive would be part of the applicant's preliminary plat submittal through a traffic study. So they would hire a traffic engineer to do that task. And they'd also have to do it in conjunction with CDOT, because they'd be the ones that have to look at that access and get things approved through CDOT. So it'd be almost a twofold. So the town's purview and jurisdiction would be to review it against Terrace Drive improvements, and CDOT's would be within their right.
So if the developer is paying for the study, does that make the person doing the study a neutral party?
It's kind of a, I'm not sure that. Yes and no. they're being paid by the developer, but they have professional best practices that they have to follow, and it's being reviewed by the town and CDOT, who are objective. So it's based on best practices and things like that, but we certainly will review and ensure it's consistent with those best practices.
And those engineers are licensed to the Department of Regulatory Agencies, so imperative that they be very objective when they're assessments.
That makes sense. Thank you. Do either of you have any more questions at the moment?
No.
I'll open questions to commissioners that are on Zoom. Please say your name and then present your question or comment.
Yeah, this is Bill. Wolf. I have a question, and first of all, can you hear me?
We can hear you, but it's faint, so try and speak up as much as you
All
can.
right, here we go. The question is on the Vista Terrace, the original Vista Terrace subdivision. Is that, and this is a question for TJ, is the original subdivision non-conforming relative to the ingress, egress, having two entrance and exits? And in that case, is this subdivision just piggybacking on the non-conforming element of the original? That makes sense?
It certainly does.
I'm gonna go ahead and repeat that just because
Thank you.
everyone might not have heard that. So the question is the original Vista Terrace subdivision non-conforming relative to egress, entering, exit, and as the proposed subdivision essentially piggybacking on that? Is that right, Bill?
Correct. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's there are a couple of layers to navigate on that one. So first, I don't know exactly when the original Vista Terrace subdivision was approved and what the standards requirements were at that time. I would suspect that is what we would refer to as a legal non-conforming. It was approved under different standards at a time when the second access wasn't necessary. So that's the existing subdivision. Now, of course, you never really want to extend a nonconformity, but what we have to do is look at the impact that a development is having or request is having and make some judgment calls, if you will, on the level of impact. And again, so we want to leave that conversation open at the moment because the traffic warrant and the review of subsequent preliminary plat would tell us a lot more. We don't get that level of information to be able to make a definitive requirement, if you will, of, hey, you have to add a second access.
Mhm.
So if that makes some sense. So we're still working through that, and we'll get additional information with subsequent processes to be able to understand how to mitigate that in the future. There are going to be a lot of factors that go into it.
Right. Just something that I think does warrant some negotiation. So, thanks.
Yeah, just another component of that is that we did, as staff, look at possible connections, and frankly, there just really aren't any easy ones. So it could come down to, variety of options in a variety of situations.
All right, thank you.
Jennifer, do you have any questions?
Yes, I have a couple questions for TJ. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. So this is a twofold question. With all the comments I see and the town not being unsure about supplying adequate infrastructure and not having enough information, I was just wondering why you were urging us to approve this. Then on top of that, if you approve it, I understand we're approving a sketch plan, but I wanted to understand or make sure I understand exactly what the approval means if we're approving the 20 single homes plus the 20 ADUs, or if there's other stuff that comes with this sketch plan that we're approving. Did that make sense?
I think so. I'll take a look at Preston's handbook and make sure that I understood that and so that everybody can hear it. So in general, if staff does have concerns about some of these, the project not being able to meet some of the standards, why are we recommending approval? Recommending that the commission approve it. And then the second is if the commission does approve, what does that mean? What's actually being approved and what the next steps are, essentially. But,
Yes.
okay. So first, let me back up a little bit and clarify that this is the sketch plan. That is a conceptual process and concept. Many of the concerns that staff has brought up are quite technical and engineering comments. And so that's why in conversations with the applicant, they were comfortable being able to meet some of the technical engineering and design standards that are required by the town. But they want to get the conceptual approval before spending all of the time, money, and effort in designing. You may remember that the town's preliminary plat process requires construction documents. So it's a quite technical, detailed set of plans that needs to come in at preliminary plat. So that essentially is why we're making that recommendation, because based on conversations, we're comfortable that conversations that we've had with the applicant, that they're able and willing to meet the standards and address the comments that we've made, and that those will occur through just the standard design process that comes with a preliminary plat. So that's where most of that was. Then the question of what exactly is approved, when we start looking at the impact, the sketch plan and the concept, we start looking at things like the density, the impacts. So I think what is in front of the commission this evening is 20 single-family homes with up to 20 accessory dwelling units. That is, I would suggest, what you all should be considering this evening. And then the ancillary impacts of that. Again, is this the location for this type of development? And that, I think, is the question. So as we go through, I'm sure we'll talk more about each of those elements and their associated impacts. But if just approved as is, yes, you could expect up to 20 single-family homes and up to, and no limit on accessory dwelling units for those 20 homes.
Provided that the applicant went further along in the
Correct.
process.
Correct, yes. Sorry, that is just, thank you, Preston. That is the concept plan, sketch plan. There's still preliminary plat and then final plat part as well. So this is not at all the final, but we'll definitely be reviewing more details.
And I'll piggyback on that. Jennifer used the word urge. I just want to clarify, by no means is town staff urging approval of this. I think the more appropriate word would be recommending approval for all the reasons TJ just cited, after a very objective, hard look at what's being proposed and a commitment to meeting the standards that TJ was talking about. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments from the commissioners at this time? I think we're ready to open it up to the applicant.
Hi, good evening. Chris Hawkins with Outline Planning, 730 Sabeta Drive. Before I begin, I believe Eric would like to make a few comments. Is that correct, Eric?
Sure. I'd like to thank the mayor, town administration and staff, entire planning commission, and the community for giving us the opportunity to do our review this evening and take a look at what we're proposing. I'd really like to introduce everybody who's involved, because it's very important that you know who you're dealing with and who we bring to the table here. Tim Kearns, our managing general partner. He's been involved in Colorado real estate for over 40 years. Started out in CB, moved over to Breck, did a lot of work in Breckenridge, vertical development, as well as condominium work. He lives in Ridgway. From an accountability standpoint, I want everybody to know where everybody's coming from and where the accountability is. Chris Hawkins, our certified planner. He's got 28 years of experience in planning. He's got a master's degree in planning. He lives in Ridgway. Dan Quigley, who's not able to be here tonight, he just left with his family for a trek. He's our PE, our professional engineer. He's the principal of Buckhorn Engineering. He's a PE, been a professional engineer for 23 years. Does a lot of work with Joanne and has a strong mutual relationship with Joanne Fagan, the town engineer. He's a Colorado School of Mines graduate. He lives in Montrose. David Reed, Esquire, has been practicing law in Colorado since 1979 with an emphasis in real estate, land use, and municipal law. He graduated magna cum laude. He's a current Montrose City Councilman, and he lives in Montrose. And then my name is Eric Faust. I live in Ridgway. Some of the key points that I'd like to point out, and I really want to turn this over to Chris because he's done a great job with our presentation, is that this proposed development is within the town, which I think everyone understands, but from a standpoint of cluster development encouragement, I think it needs close review, that it's not sprawl, it's not annexation, it's within the town, and it's already platted as eventual development from the Vista Terrace development that currently exists. The ADUs, which have been mentioned, that's a possibility. The density's affected there. We tried to put the ADU caveat out there because ADUs are encouraged by the town. And if we do ADUs, our covenants will include the following. There'll absolutely be long-term rental only. You'll need to live in the county and you'll need to be employed in the county. And we may have flexibility there for close county employment, San Miguel, San Juan. But I think you understand the point. Those will be covenants that we're going to adhere to. the local accountability is a big deal for us, and that's why I wanted to spend that time saying where everybody's from. Another key point in our proposal is if someone wants to, if this eventually is approved, if someone wants to purchase a lot and construct a home in the Four Winds development, it will be solar powered. It will be a minimum of 70% solar powered. And the only reason that it would be less than 100 is because of the constraints that San Miguel has with regard to a 10 kW system being the maximum. So that's near and dear. That will be an absolute covenant in our HOA, and that'll be enforced by both Tim and Chris, who are going to sit on our board of review. There'll also be a conduit required for electric car charger provision, but every house will have a EV conduit required. The geography of the lot, I don't want to get into too much. We've obviously been advised architecturally as well as engineering wise, and we think we've come up with a great use of the land, respecting the land with a minimal disturbance envelope. We don't want to disturb sage habitat. We're going to all but limit or eliminate watering of grass, green grass. It's going to be construction within the disturbance envelope and preserving the habitat. And that's why we want to work through with staff on the alternate egress / entrance with the limited amount of space that we only have south facing to Terrace Drive. But that will certainly work through preliminary plat. Governance of the aesthetics will be another key point in us setting up our covenants for the HOA. We're going to make sure there's no shiny materials. As I said earlier, we'll limit areas of lawn for minimal watering. Extensive covenants for wildlife. We did already, to Mr. Meyer's request, submitted a request for Kelly Crane to review it. It's in our packet, and she came back with a favorable overview, basically because it's within the town, and as opposed to sprawl and wildlife disturbance outside of the town limits. There's only 1.8 square miles in the town. Limited area for development. She gave us a affirmative review on the wildlife situation, which we can go into more depth with. We're also going to limit the square footage of homes. There's not going to be gigantic homes up there. I don't want to get it pinned down yet, but we sure will before private approval, final approval. But thinking of somewhere in these are single family homes on 1 acre lots that'll be, let's say, in the 2,500 to maybe 4,800 square foot range. As far as the open space, we're proud of that. 30% of the plan is open space. And the multi-use trail, which is on the western side of the property in the view corridor, is something that we don't have to do. That land could easily be built on. There could be higher density. If it was in other communities, it would absolutely be built on. But we're very much in favor of the amount of open space we have. In summary, I want to turn it over to Chris, but I think we have an extremely well thought out engineered plan that we're very open to work with town administration and staff, as well as the planning commission, and do what needs to be done to reach compromise and do what's best on behalf of Ridgway. That's what's important. You can see where we all live. We want to do what's right on behalf of the neighborhood, the property, and the town of Ridgway. And we're committed to the best development we can possibly put together. And I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
So this is for the Zoom meeting, this is for the meeting. So I'm going to try to do these together so the public can see these at the same time. So
I was told by Preston that that's something we're trying to work on.
Yeah,
It's an
that's
IT
great.
issue, and it would be great if it was just one, but we're
Yeah.
not there yet.
So Okay, so as far as the acreage, you've already seen this map. I just want to outline the acreage because there was some confusion about the size of the properties. McChesney Lot 2 is 33 acres. The 9.5 acres from the Endicott property are part of this application that's zoned FD and is proposed to be rezoned residential as part of the sketch plan. And then there's 35 acres remaining with the Endicott property, not 200. As far as the Vista Terrace history, I think it's important to look at this because this whole area was annexed into town limits in 1981. It included Vista Terrace Filing 1, McChesney subdivision and Endicott property, and it was zoned residential with the annexation. This blue line you see, sorry, around the outside is the area that was annexed. So I can't show with this, but you can see the area around the outside. So that whole area was brought in. There was a town downzoning from residential, it was R1 to FD. At some point, there's actually a letter in the town records that indicates that the owners weren't aware of that occurring. It was just downzone. And so that's why that's zoned FD today and not residential. And in 1994, the town rezoned McChesney subdivision from FD back to R1 with the replat of the property. The subdivision itself had a phasing plan with the original filing of Vista Terrace Filing 1. This is part of the town records too. This is all Vista Terrace Filing number 1 to the south. And then the Endicott property, that's the remainder, was supposed to be phase 2, but this map's old. And then the McChesney subdivision, 9.5 acres for phase 3. Again, this was an old phasing map, but it shows that this was all an intentional development that the town approved. The Vista Terrace Filing number 1 plat was in 1982, and it clearly shows outlots for future development. So everyone that bought a lot in Vista Terrace knew there was going to be future development over here. So it shouldn't be a surprise that this is out there and looking at the zoning. The McChesney subdivision came in 1994, again with the rezoning from FD back to residential, and it was carved around lot 1. So just a little bit of the history. I think it's important to remember where the subdivision evolved from because all of us weren't here. Some may have been, but to me, it was good just to have that understanding. In 2007, Robert Savat had a work session discussion with council, I believe it was. And it included basically the same land as you're looking at today. And it was 144 lots on 42.5 acres. That is an urban level of density in a rural area. Definitely high density. And that's at 3.4 units per acre overall. That obviously wasn't well received. It never moved forward. But the Vista Terrace Homeowners Association participated in that process. And they had a letter that just said, in keeping with the existing 46 home sites in Vista Terrace, which are clearly visible from the highway in town, we would like to see the lot sizes of 1.25 acres with a minimum lot size of 1 acre. So that was at that time. I know people have changed. There's new people living in here and that doesn't lock anyone in, but that was at least the view about the 2007 proposal. And the actual Four Winds proposal is very close to that. I did this comparative chart between Vista Terrace and Four Winds. I actually entered all the lots into a spreadsheet and looked at the acreage. Again, 48 lots in Vista Terrace, 20 in Four Winds. Vista Terrace has about a little over 75 acres, Four Winds 43. Density, and I just did this on 1 unit per 2.15 acres, a little bit different than TJ calculated it. Or in Vista Terrace, it's 1 unit per 1.57 acres. So Vista Terrace is a little bit higher on it when you look at it that way, dividing the number of lots by the total land area. Open space, we're about 30%. Vista Terrace is at 7%. Average lot size, again, a little bit different than TJ. I have to figure out why, but 1.4 acres versus 1.5 acres, very similar. In the density, if you look at the lot sizes, They range from 1 to 3.54, and here we're going from 0.96 to 2.97. The subdivision plan itself, TJ went over this, but I did want to point out that when you really look at this, you look at the subdivision at the whole of it. You want to incentivize certain things. You want to get open space. You want cluster development overall. And so one thing when we were looking at this project was creating disturbance envelopes with 10,000 square feet maximum size, keeping all improvements inside the disturbance envelopes, except for driveways, address monuments, utilities, and similar things like that. We'll get it pegged out. And the really important part of this was protection of the sage habitat, because we knew that wildlife was going to be a very important issue out there. No perimeter fencing on any lots, fenced dog runs and leashes with dogs, bear-proof trash cans, and basically rooms built into houses. So trash cans aren't on the outside of the house. You actually have to push them in a room. Eric already talked about the solar power for that. Conduit for electric vehicle charging, limit the area allowed for formal irrigated yards, encouraging ADUs in line with town standards, design standards for each new home, and limited lighting above and beyond the town requirements to just ingress and egress, no architectural lighting, really super dark sky friendly. This is the greenest subdivision I worked on either as a government planner or as a consulting planner. It's truly cluster development. I saw one of the comments where it was that it doesn't look like Vista Terrace. We don't want it to look like Vista Terrace. We want lots of green natural sage habitat saved and development clustered into those home sites. So if you look at the amount of both what would be HOA open space and private open space on each lot, it's a very clustered development plan, and that was intentional. Do you want to talk about the solar energy much, Eric, since we've already kind of been into the time a little bit, or I think we got a point across on this?
I think Roger's on standby. He knows he should only speak for 2 minutes, but he's.
Is that okay, Preston? Madam Chair? Thank you.
This is Roger. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I'm not on video, but that's fine. Coming to you from Denver, but I'm a long-term West Slope native and still maintain a residence there, raise my kids there. So I'm just thrilled to be part of the team for Four Winds. I've worked in the renewable energy and now solar space for many decades in my 40 years in Colorado. And I'm here just for one clear purpose, to help the group make sure that we do our solar development both in compliance with laws and to track national trends and Colorado developments to do the very best we can to bring the highest quality model program to Ridgway. I've got some background in my slide about the Bill of Rights and some of the developments in Colorado. The bottom line is solar is not only embraced, but in many situations cannot be denied. And the Bill of Rights grants solar access to all citizens. It used to be that HOAs had pretty strong control and would have very severe limitations on solar. Over the years, that's changed not only in Colorado, but nationally. And increasingly, HOAs now have exactly the kind of structure we have designed here to help people design and make the solar work best with their individual situation. Next slide, please. It works, solar and sustainability at Four Winds is a natural, not only for the obvious environmental benefits, but the cost benefits. Many of you have seen the Inflation Act and some of the tax incentive changes that have just been passed. Those are going to enhance the ability of individuals to take advantage of solar storage and sustainability, sustainable technologies. And this is a perfect opportunity to put these initiatives into action. Our plan is to make sure we balance the demand for solar with individual design and affordability. Next slide, please. Instead of restricting solar, we're going to follow the nationwide trend that we've seen in California, even towns like South Miami Beach. Many municipalities are now saying let's just put solar in at the front end. That makes the most sense. And we're seeing that in my trade association and so many other ways. This is an opportunity to do that here while while designing to meet each homeowner's usage, as Eric mentioned. We've got a design committee and a plan and our covenants that makes a group of folks available for a positive resource to help people meet state-of-the-art building technologies to make sure we don't use more energy than we need at the front end and combine that with solar and storage on the back end. Next slide. Not only do we want solar for the energy needs, as you know, electric vehicles are here and will be our future increasingly, even in rural communities that I know and love. And so this development provides for electric vehicle charging. Battery storage for around the clock supply will be encouraged, but not mandated yet because we don't quite have the technology. We're not only going to do the things to make sure that the design covenants encourage efficiency, but also have an integrated design. So the pieces fit together and make this the type of model that everyone in the country wants and is putting a lot of emphasis is, and we think will have a huge impact and will stand out in Ridgway going forward. Next slide, please. In summary, I'm so proud and enthused to be part of a small part of the team to make this Four Winds development a model for combining sustainability, renewable technologies with cost savings. And I think what we should make sure we know is that all studies, and I've been involved for years, are now showing that property values are enhanced when you do this at the front end. This is what people want, people need, and increasingly with the legislation going forward, it's going to be mandated across the state and our nation. So we're looking forward to working with you to move forward on this project. I'm glad to take questions, comments, or any other input. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So as far as the density, TA has touched on this. I'm going to try to not be redundant, but I just want to be clear. Two things here that are showing. One is the master plan envisioned density allows up to 43 units. We're proposing 20, so we're about 53% less than that. This is the initial growth boundary that Mayor Clark mentioned earlier, and I pulled up the policy on that. And so it just states this here in the master plan. It says, and this isn't going to be on the screen because I didn't have it here. The initial growth boundary delineates the area in which the town will encourage urban levels of development in the next 10 to 20 years. The boundary includes areas that are contiguous to established parts of Ridgway that are already served by town services, and to which utility extensions could logically and efficiently be provided. The purpose of the IGB is to support the community's desire to grow in an orderly, logical, and sequential pattern outward from the existing town core. In general, urban levels of development outside the IGB would be considered premature until substantial development has occurred within the boundary. And I just put forth that this is a rule level of density at 1 unit per acre. I know that's an interpretation that's subject to town council and your review, but and in this instance, overall, there's no specific policies that say don't approve subdivisions outside of the IGB. There's no specific policies like that. So I know we'll probably talk more about that. Conformance with the master plan overall. Sorry, let me get back on this. Again, preserve, protect, and restore natural habitats. I think you understand already our measures that we're doing that in the subdivision. I did want to comment on the steep slope standards. Everyone's already laser focused on 20% slopes. It was in a CDAO map that was, or sorry, Colorado Parks and Wildlife map that was incorporated into the plan that showed wildlife habitat and 20% slopes. That was really meant to allow for site-specific analysis. And more importantly, there's a policy in the plan that says you should define steep slopes as what they are. It's a whole community discussion someday. Most communities, I'm just putting this out there, say slopes 30% or greater are steep slopes and development constraints. I know that's Ridgway's choice at some point to define it. But what we looked at this is just based on my experience and Dan's experience was 30% slopes. And this is a 30% slope map, and we're avoiding all areas with slopes over 30% are cratered. We respect the town's map, and we'll certainly show that for discussion purposes, but there is a big difference between 20% slopes and 30% slopes when you're looking at development. Conformance with the master plan, again, in terms of open space, the disturbance envelope, protecting wildlife. I did want to comment that the Division of Wildlife states this is in winter habitat area, and they go through and support their concerns with it. The bottom line is the CPW supports development in city limits rather than ex-urban developments. And they felt the measures that we had already proposed were suitable to protect wildlife. So I think we did okay, such as the disturbance envelopes, preserving the habitat, no perimeter fencing, dog containment and leashes are very important, especially in the winter, and then requiring bear-proof trash cans. So that is in the packet, and we were glad to do that. Another master plan policy is low impact development. And I already talked about the clustering, disturbance envelopes, gravel roadways and driveways. All those are rule levels of development that really create a softer footprint on the landscape, and you don't concentrate runoff when you do that sort of development. We still will have to provide stormwater detention or retention on site. There's no doubt there. Renewable energy. I think it's, sorry, slide too far. So as far as renewable energy, you already heard about that and what we're doing out there. I think that should be the standard going forward. Hopefully that's acceptable. We're going to consider other ways we can improve that, what's already proposed. Water conservation, we understand that's important in the town, and we really want to limit. We're actually up to the point of saying no formal yards and just xeriscaping. So I think that's going to help, but we still need to provide an analysis on our proposed design standards to Ridgway standards to show how we're meeting that. And we are going to propose fire mitigation rules out here, because if you don't get them established in the subdivision early on, especially in the, kind of that urban growth interface area, people plant all sorts of trees, and then all of a sudden you're going to have a fire hazard. So we don't want that to start. We really want to limit the new trees, especially coniferous trees, flammable trees, not native trees. We want to keep that natural landscape. Master plan diversity of housing types. I heard some premature comments on this. We really are trying to provide a variety of housing out here. I think we need to dial that in more, working with city staff and overall, but single family lots, there's hardly any left in the town right now. I mean, you go out to River Park, you go in Solar Ranches, there's nothing for sale. I mean, things are getting developed. So there's a demand there for it. And the ADUs are also going to help with that, solving that problem. We understand that, and I'll talk about ADUs in a minute, that we need to work through the AD issue. Neighborhood context, again, we're going to have design guidelines to ensure cohesive design overall. And then for neighborhood character, in corridor and gateway character, there's 12.7 acres of open space. And when you look at the Ridgway land use plan, the master plan, there's no green belt over that open space area. On the very back of the lot, on the Endicott property, it's showing green there. It should be parks and recreation. There's no green in that area. And actually some of the prior subdivision proposals that I saw in the town records included lots in that area we're proposing as open space. So we are purposely pulling that away from the gateway corridor and trying to protect that overall. We understand there will be some visibility of the homes in there, but certainly no more impactful than already exists in Vista Terrace. Highway access, we understand this is probably the #1 issue for Vista Terrace residents. Traffic study will be submitted to CDOT, and Eric and Tim are going to be subject to any CDOT requirements. We understand that. So it's an engineering design study, and then CDOT's going to say you need to do this, and Eric either needs to agree or not agree. And then if he doesn't agree, then the development will go forward. If he agrees, that's obviously something we'll have to do more detailed design. And just to reiterate what TJ has said, the town's code is very clear. CDOT has jurisdiction here. It's not really, and it's kind of nice for a jurisdiction not to have to get into that, but CDOT really is going to say yes or no, thumbs up or thumbs down, and we're subject to that overall. Subdivision access, we understand is an issue. And we're proposing now an emergency access route in blue, just in the rare instance if the stem of the lollipop, I don't know who came up with that, but if the stem of the lollipop gets clogged, then you have an emergency access route out. I know town staff has not evaluated that. The other thing I did want to point out on this map is there's leach fields shown on every lot and a replacement leach field too. That's in the new plans. Town hasn't looked at, just to show if one leach field fails, there's going to be room for another leach field, and our home sizes are going to be based around those realities. And so when you're looking at the leach fields and where the home might go, these aren't going to be big, massive homes on these lots within the disturbance envelopes. They're actually going to be fairly small homes. Now, just for public comments, just because so many came in, town accepted Vista Terrace and the associated right-of-ways back when it was constructed and accepted the maintenance. That doesn't fall typically to a new developer coming in. That's already an accepted issue. Should there be some issue on the access road that is incoming, like it doesn't meet fire district grades, which this road does, or wasn't wide enough, which this road is, sure, we'd have to revisit that. But in this instance, to say that the developer Forwin should pay for Vista Terrace road improvements is like saying that, the next phase of River Park down there should pay for, sidewalks or new improvements in the first phase. It's just not done. Developers will pay their own way, but for their own projects typically. And so to be asking for those sorts of improvements outside of it is fairly unique in my experience. The town approved the Vista Terrace annexation, the phasing plan, the rezoning, Vista Terrace filing 1, McChesney subdivision, and all that is cul-de-sac. And this was a question that came out earlier. Ideally, sure, it would have dual access, but it's landlocked to the south. To the east, you don't want to encourage any roads going east. And then to the north, it's private property outside the town's urban growth boundary. It's really is a truly landlocked annexation in a rezoned area. And again, to try to have a new developer solve that problem when the town approved the original plan as being a cul-de-sac community is fairly unique. I think we're willing to have that conversation about it and see if there's options, but should that be the sole responsibility of a developer in this situation from a fairness perspective? I guess would just be my question. The Four Winds is not subject to Vista Terrace filing number 1 declaration at all. It's a separate legal description. We looked at that. Four Winds will create its own declaration, bylaws, and design standards. It will be an independently operated association. And Four Winds will be responsible for maintenance and insurance of all the common areas and open space on the property. That's Four Winds. It will not have anything to do with open space over there. We won't have access to their private open space. That's a private open space. But this open space will still be private. And the one element that's unique in this is we would like to put a more pedestrian trail down to the existing crossing down to the river trail. There's a river trail crossing right there now. It goes down to the BLM land. It's there. And if CDOT requires anything for crossing that more than exists today, I think everyone is aware you have to cross that highway fairly quickly, just like you have to cross the highway to get over to the rat trails. You got to do it quickly and in between cars. So again, that's something we're proposing as an amenity for both Four Winds community and as well for the existing Vista Terrace community, and understand that's going to be a bit of a conversation overall. The water supply and upgrading that again, Four Winds is meeting town standards today for a new water storage tank. Any improvements that need to be made to the water delivery storage system to ensure it can get up to the top and that design, that's all the responsibility of this developer. But to say that all of a sudden you need to provide fire flow or more water pressure for a subdivision that was designed to an older town standard today, again, I would just ask, is that fair to a developer who has nothing to do with that subdivision filing? And should that be borne by those people? That's a good improvement district conversation, probably. The one thing I would point out is that the existing Vista Terrace will benefit dramatic fire flow because the tank will be expanded. They can use that water too. So there's some incremental benefit to that. Again, the detailed water engineering and all that stuff, the details will be provided with the final review. Again, no improvement district is proposed by Four Winds. We will participate, or the future owners will participate in anyone that's created. And I believe these have to be voted and adopted by the affected parties as a tax on properties. So again, maybe it's changed and the government can impose them. But in this instance, Four Winds will have a covenant in the declaration and on the plat saying you will participate in sewer improvements or water improvements that benefit the whole area, and we'll work on the final language of that. As far as ADUs, they're great for the community, but I think we're going to cap ADUs at 25% just because of the concerns. And we also have to design the water system to meet those standards, and the CDOT access study needs a number. So that's the number we're thinking of, which is going to be 5 ADUs up there. Hopefully that appeases the concern, because in my experience, even if a jurisdiction allows 100% ADUs, you're lucky if you get 25% in any subdivision. They're just so rare. You want some people to do it, some people not. But anyway, visual impacts, just quickly, again, we talked a little bit about that. I don't know the accuracy of that one rendering that's in the packet that you had. I don't think they're going to stick up that much, but those lots are located along the ridge there. The county visual impact regulations do not apply in this situation. And if you want the visual impacts evaluated more before or as part of preliminary plat, we're glad to do that and have that conversation. But you can really do that as part of design to try to save trees in the foreground, natural colors and material, non-reflective roofs, all glass is reflective. I always hated that statement, but and things like that. And just pointing out that Vista Terrace already has lots of visual issues, not only to the highway, but the whole town. As far as outs overall, Buckhorn Engineering feels it's suitable for septic systems. We'll have to do a detailed geotechnical report, soils report for the preliminary plat, and the lot sizes as proposed meet the standard. There's not a minimum. And last but not least, the developer no longer has a right of first refusal on the property. So some of those comments are moot on that. That just changed in the progression or regression of the project. And then I guess I would just say we just respectfully, be able to respond to any public comments that you'd like us to address, or we feel that we need to respond to, that they're just way out there. And I really appreciate your time. It's a big project, a lot of comments. So thank you for the ability to present our plans to you.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, we're glad to answer any questions you might have at this time too. So.
John, anything?
Well, my questions are mostly around things that you said you're gonna deal with that preliminary plat, and I understand the rationale behind that. So I think there's big questions about whether or not this development overall, this is part of Vista Terrace. Vista Terrace was annexed and subdivided more than 40 years ago, at a totally different time in Ridgway's history and a different time in the kind of planning philosophies that were in use. I just think this many more units on septics are potentially problematic, and I know I can't get into the details of that until, as you said, the soil stuff is done. But that's one of my biggest concerns. I basically thinking of things that I would like to state when we're deliberating. I don't think
Any of the commissioners on Zoom have questions for Chris at this time?
Thank you.
Nothing from TJ, ready to open it for,
I think we need to take on public comment.
okay.
guess he didn't speak. We're just discussing process here. I've had time to read the late ads, the letters that came in the last couple of days. Has anybody else on the planning commission had time to read those?
Yeah.
You guys on Zoom?
Commissioners on Zoom, have you had an opportunity to read the late ad letters that were put in Dropbox? There were 3 of them.
Yep.
I'm going to open the meeting to public comment and questions on the application or issue. Everyone that steps up to the podium, I need you to announce your name and where you live. Also, all of the letters that were submitted have been put into our packet. So we've read them, even the late ads. We just confirmed that those have been read. If you want to comment anyway, you are welcome to do so. We are asking that if you're reiterating something that was said before you, perhaps you can just step up and say, I agree with that statement, instead of going through the whole thing again, just in the mind of time. But the public comment is open.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Steve McComb. I live with my wife Kathy at 290 Terrace Drive. I would like to address what I consider the elephant in the room with this proposal, and that's the lack of secondary egress. I don't need to go over the stats, but bottom line is another 120 plus people are going to be dumped into this neighborhood, plus friends coming to see them, plus service people. And I think it's a critical design flaw that there is not a secondary egress in this plan. Now, I had a video created to illustrate just how dangerous this intersection will become. And I'm doing it by showing real time today, traffic down there. And I want you to keep in mind an additional 120 some odd people added to this neighborhood, no additional egress. So Preston? So we'll take a look at this video and then I'll have a few comments after. More volume. Right there, buddy. Pause it, please. Okay, what I've done here is come up with what I think the future intersection will look like. I'm assuming for a second that the CDOT will put in turn lane on southbound traffic and acceleration on southbound traffic. The northbound turn lane and acceleration currently exists. However, I'd like to point out this lane is so short that I think everybody's like me, they wait till the traffic clears and then they go off. To make this effective, you have to elongate it considerably. So you've got the developer proposed single track bike path which winds down the hill on the east side of the highway and exits right at the same intersection. The idea is that they hook up with the path or road down to the river trail, because this bike path is almost negligible. It's not very long at all. So my contention here, folks, is that the influx of activity, even with the addition of southbound lanes for turning and accelerating, is an unsafe situation. And with the advent of another 120 people or so in that neighborhood, you're going to have a couple of people all the time trying to get out. You're going to have people coming back from Montrose to get in, and people coming from Ridgway. All the while, 60-mile-an-hour traffic buzzing back and forth. So, in conclusion, I'd like to say that I believe the Four Winds development is allowed to go forward as is, without a secondary egress to relieve the pressure of this intense intersection. It's not a matter of if there'll be a horrific accident or accidents, it's just a matter of when. And finally, I would like to say, and I think this was even quoted in the paper by one of the council members or maybe a mayor, is that you needed more time in the moratorium to ensure looking over all the documents thoroughly for the safety and protection of its citizens. I'm asking you to reject this proposal as is because of the safety and protection of the citizens in that neighborhood. It is just too dangerous. Trust me. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Dan Berlin, 550 Vista Terrace. I think the applicants.
Speak a little louder.
Oh, sorry. Dan Berlin, 550 Vista Terrace. I think the applicant said it best. They are not trying to match the look and feel of Vista Terrace. And I think that's why you have a room full of people here on a variety of different issues. You know, when I first decided that I wanted to move to Ridgway, I was trying to figure out where to move. You know, and I kept on kind of getting drawn towards Solar Ranch, but there was something that wasn't quite right about Solar Ranch. You know, and then I discovered Vista Terrace. And if you go up to Vista Terrace, the lots are all interesting sizes, interesting shapes. The houses are facing different directions. You know, it feels like all of a sudden, if this proposal goes forward, it's like bringing Solar Ranch up into Vista Terrace, you know, where you've got square lots all right next to each other. At the beginning from Vista Drive, you know, there's 7 houses on 1 acre lots, all right in that one area. And that is totally different than the look and feel of Vista Terrace. We bought in Vista Terrace because we wanted to be more rural, more on the outside of the boundary of town, bumping up against open, county land. You know, and this is like bringing a development of Solar Ranch right into Vista Terrace. It will completely change the character of the neighborhood. You know, and it's just not an appropriate transition to go from town to a more rural into a more town-like development than county agriculture. It's just not an appropriate transition in terms of the look and feel. So yeah, while the numbers may work, you know, in terms of the high amount of open space they're dedicating, that's because nobody wants to build a house on that open space, right next to the highway. So they're not really giving something up in that sense. You know, so they're putting all the development right into this one central area, which creates a very different look and feel than what is Vista Terrace, bordering on county land. So, thank you.
Thank you.
No, we need that one there. We need that one. Sorry.
Thank you.
Anthony Egoff, 615 Terrace Drive. I did write a letter addressing this point, but I want to make a specific statement here. And that is, if you look at the intersection of Vista and Terrace Drives, there's some very heavy vegetation on a slope which comes up to that intersection. If there is a fire, wildfire in that area, either due to lightning strike or due to a vehicle fire, that whole area is going to be engulfed like the tragic scenes we've seen in California. And if that intersection becomes engulfed in flames, no one will get out of either of these subdivisions. It's a total block. Absolutely total block. It would be a fire trap. So you're talking about 40 some people in Vista Terrace and another 20 to 30 people in this new subdivision, all going through that node. It's not going to work. And I feel that it is your responsibility to address the safety of this at this early point to avoid any litigation later when people lose their lives, their property, become injured. So I think this is a very important thing to consider. In addition, the use of gravel roads on these steep slopes is going to be a nightmare for the maintenance department here, the Public Works Department. When those roads are plowed, the gravel is going to be thrown to the sides, to the shoulders. It's going to be basically mud. And it's either going to be mud or ice. And that erosion is going to end up in that catchment basin in our subdivision. I think it's wholly unacceptable. So there needs to be a separate egress, an emergency egress for this proposed subdivision. I'm not a NIMBY, I'm fine with it. I just want it to be done right. Thank you.
Hello, Pam Forster. I live at 435 Terrace Drive. I've lived in Steamboat, Park City, Jackson Hole, Salt Lake City. I served on the Master Plan Review Committee in order to support healthy growth and culture into our future. I applaud the Planning Commission for placing a moratorium on new development. I would have encouraged you to go for a year because I think it's going to take us longer to find out what the actual impact is of the current projects and what are the outcomes of those projects that are currently underway. I think staff did a really good job reviewing the Four Winds plan according to code and technical issues, but I don't agree that the project meets criteria for approval when you put it in the context of the master plan, specifically the community values 1 through 5. It's the Planning Commission's job to steer projects according to the master plan. And I apologize, I don't remember who was on it, who of the Planning Commission was on that committee and that work. I know John was, but I don't remember who else was. It's a very important document and hundreds of citizens and community members put a lot of hours into that as stakeholders. I want to make a few comments that I heard from the developers, both in their written document and state presentation. In regards to a general improvement district, if you were ever to try and grow the sewer system out towards this area, I would guarantee you with whatever I have that those landowners will sue the town to avoid doing it. Even if we get to a point in the future where it's necessary for health and safety, I guarantee you they'll say, no, we've got a septic and we're not doing it. Whether they do it individually as a group. I'd be amazed if they didn't sue the town. If you drive around Vista Terrace and then you stand at the site of the proposed developers, there are numbers of open space and acreage and density. They look good on paper, but if you drive around Vista Terrace, you'll see there are some areas with greater density than others. And those are the lots that you can see from the road. But in addition to houses facing in different directions, there are also hills and valleys and curves. So a lot of it isn't visible at all. If you're walking the road, you can't even see my house. If I'm up on a slope, I'm actually kind of above where this area would be. I can only see a handful of houses. So it may be, the topography is very different in Vista Terrace than it is in this proposal. When we were talking, when the developer was talking about yards and stuff, and you know, containing dogs, if you spent any time or if you live in Vista Terrace, dogs are not let out in the yard to bark. They are always on a leash, and they're not let out in the yard because we know they'll bark and disturb wildlife. We know that we're interrupting wildlife ourselves, but 2 days ago I had a bobcat walk across my deck. I mean, that happens. We all have wildlife that traverses through our homes and our areas. So it's important that dogs and cats and whatever not be allowed to just roam free or out in a yard unattended. Another comment I heard about developers not taking on building costs. I specifically remember this planning commission, and I can't remember who, but and I think it's in the master plan, don't quote me. But the concept of the philosophy of this town is you build it, you pay for it. And we've taken that stance for a long time because we're so small. We don't have a huge tax base to fund huge improvement projects. Most of my comments are in my written notes, and thank you for reading them. I appreciate it. The biggest one I want to emphasize, and thank you, John, for bringing it up. This lot is outside the initial growth boundary. And that was done intentionally, and we all did it. And we knew that because we wanted to focus on the core and have growth expand out. This is in fact a leapfrog project, and it's not necessary to happen. We all know that the pandemic, you know, shook our world, literally, figuratively, socially, economically, it did everything. So the initial growth boundary was written to be for the next 10 to 20 years, even taking into account the advanced rate of growth that we've experienced because of the pandemic. Even if you cut that down to 10 years, it should not happen now. There's no reason for us to go that far at this stage in our development. Leapfrogging is not good. It's not good for planning. It does create traffic problems because we're not able to plan for it in advance. It would be dealing with it reactively, and that would be horrible. As mentioned, we only have one egress from Vista Terrace. Our tank meets code to fight fire, but I guarantee you if one house is going up there, it's going to be more than one if we actually have a brush fire. That's pretty much, oh, do I have a second? One of the things that happened when we did at the end, so at the beginning and the end of the master plan work time, which was over a year, 14 months-ish, there was a wonderful person brought in by the consultants, and he was a poet. And he took sticky notes and sat at tables, and then he would spontaneously come up with a poem. And he did it for us twice, once at the beginning of the work project, and then once at the very end. And the last one, it'll just take me a little bit to read. It's called The Beautiful Finale. And what he did was everybody had Post-it notes, and they just wrote a word or a phrase or something. And then he came up, not kidding, 20 minutes later and read us this poem. And I think we were all pretty taken aback because he really captured what we were trying to do and what we put so much energy into it. Excitement builds, the hopeful and the skeptical gather, smiles, handshakes, and eye rolls, political landscapes, democracy matters, insiders, outsiders, bridges, dividers, familiar patterns, outliers, the land reflects it all. Little walls fall, breathe, poetry. Surveys, trivia, bear with me. Projected growth is lower than we had all thought for the town. Wait, shoot, the region size could double, treble. Upturns, downturns, backspins, U-turns. You can look around and see all the wheels turn. Questions burning, calculations, transformations. What do you want? New roads, walking trails, bike paths, parking, healthy food, recreation, and space to create fill the collective imagination. But who is missing from the conversation? Who notices? Who has reservations? How might the conversation about jobs, housing, services, and transportation change? If we were here, questions to follow up on. For now, play the role, dream big. Before the authority comes to scale, dreams come down to size. They always come, they take big bites, and some pay with their lives. But this is just an exercise, right? Until it gets real. Oh, it is getting real. Where are the comedians? Why didn't we bring the circus? Work with us. If they try to bring Home Depot, we'll either burn it down or stamp NFW in the ground. That was the resident's quote. Let's talk vision. Ridgway is a welcoming, community-minded, rural, small town, situated in a beautiful mountain valley, and it's going to stay that way. Thank you.
I move fast. My name's Russ Capias. I live up on Long Hill, so I'm a county resident, 178 Canyon Point. I am approaching retirement age and have been thinking about moving closer to town, smaller lot, smaller house. And when I saw a mention of the development in the Plain Dealer, the thing that caught my eye was the all-electric nature of this development. I was born in 1960. There were 3 billion people on the planet then. There's 7.5 billion now. Development's inevitable. We need smart development. I think these guys are doing a great job of that. There are a lot of concerns. I don't live in Vista Terrace. Maybe someday I will. But I do think what they presented in terms of development technology makes a lot of sense to me. And just as a single data point from me as maybe a candidate resident of that development, and I think the way this is platted out would draw in people that are like-minded to myself. I'm kind of an energy nerd. I would buy one of these lots, build a house that's probably no bigger than 2,400 square feet, maybe something like 2,000 square feet, all electric, net zero, net energy positive, probably a gray water system to help, with the water use in the house. And I probably wouldn't build it in 80. So again, it's just one data point, but as a candidate resident of this, I think that's where I would be. And I think a lot of folks would be similar, in mindset to what I'm thinking. So, it would be something that would minimize the impact of this overall for the town. Just one comment on the egress, ingress. That's one thing I asked him when I first talked to him, that is a concern for me as well. But the first thing that comes to my mind is this would be a CDOT thing, but if the speed limit were dropped to 45 on 550, maybe from the stop light out to 24, that's maybe a 3-mile section. That would add 1 minute of travel time to somebody's time through there, and might make a big difference in safety. So I don't know, something to think about. So thank you.
Thanks. Hello, Ann Malik, 664 Terrace. Thank you all for being here and for reading our letters and listening to our thoughts and concerns. Seems there are several details yet to be revealed about the character of this project. One thing that Eric mentioned was the potential size of these houses with minimums of 2,500 square foot and up to 4,800 square foot homes. That really seems more in line with Mountain Village than Ridgway. I just want to put it out there that just doesn't seem in character with our town. Their comment. Just a little bit. Oh, yes, yes. And I think the person who just spoke would be an exemplary potential resident. I don't know that everyone thinks that way. Many people want to build very large homes. I would encourage town to lower the potential minimum size of houses. I would think that most of the houses in Vista Terrace are anywhere between 1,200 and 2,500 square feet.
And they're proposing that the minimum size is 2,500 square feet up to 4,800 square feet. Also, I have some concerns about the eventuality of the 9.5 acres of the Endicott property. I heard Chris mention something about a step plan. I am not sure what this means. It looks like they do have it in the maps as potential for future development. And I wonder what they're not telling us, if they're trying to get this by so that they can then do another subdivision within there. I just wonder what the eventuality there is. Also, just another comment on that open space. They were kind of both highlighting that it's 12.74 acres, but it is unusable space above the highway. So they're touting it as green space, but Chris also noted that it was too steep to develop. So I'm not sure which one they really want to play part on. Also the water, they say they're going to add a tank, which is great. That is additional space, but no additional line. And already we are having to pump the water up from town, and I'm not sure the logistics or the capacities of those lines, and if it can actually serve the number of people, including the ADUs. It seems like some of their information doesn't quite address the number of people and water that needs to be brought to the space for the ADUs. I really just urge the commission members to think this through slowly. I know they got under the wire with the moratorium that's been mentioned, but please slow down. This seems like it's really rushed. And I really urge you to go up there and look at the land, look at the intersection, look at the proposed open space. To me, open space should be a place that you enjoy, and really it's just super noisy place above the highway. And yeah, I just encourage you to go up there and look at it and see. There's been some great comments from others about how it would impact the feel of the community. And, yeah, please slow down. Thank you.
Well, I came equipped for the meeting, as you can see. But after listening to the developer, I have questions. One of the questions, no, thank Preston for replying to my emails.
Excuse me, you need to introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Roy Klingen, 520 Vista Drive.
And then speak into the microphone as best you can. People having a hard time hearing.
I want to thank Preston for replying to my emails. He was very good about it. I had a lot of questions. He asked me if I wanted a personal conference, and we've been sick and have not been able to do that. Thank you, Preston, for doing that. One of my concerns when I talked to Preston was a water supply. And we're adding so many people here. When we came here 10 years ago, the mountains had snow on it in September. If you will look out there right now, it's gone. We have a problem with water supply here. I think it's something that we need to address. I saw the report, Preston sent me the link on it that we have by the people who submitted that. I think they're wrong. I think they're drastically wrong. Something that I did see on TV, and I think I've sent Preston, I'd like to show you this. United Kingdom had the same assessment. And the assessment was that we were supposed to have water to 2050. United Kingdom right now is 2050 out of water. I think that the assessment that we have, when you look at that mountain, and I understand that's where we get our water, we don't have water. We have it in the Blue Lakes, and we have no more reserves. We're getting rains, and I don't care what they say. Common sense tells me if we keep adding and adding, and I think it was in the paper about the moratorium taking place, that is one of the best things I've seen this council do, is take a moratorium on the building. If we run out of water, we're going to be like cities in Texas, that they wind up ghost towns. We will not be a city here. I don't like spit baths, and that's what we're going to be down to. We have less water allotted to us than Montrose, Lake City, Silverton. If you will look up what their basic rate is, we have less water allotted to us than they do. Is that telling me something that our council already knows, that we have a water problem? I don't know. When they took, excuse me for wearing this, I caught, last time I was here, I caught COVID. So that's the only time we ever worn it, my wife and I did. So I'm sorry about that. Let me take a look. One of the things I saw is the deers. If you will take a look at that intersection, there's probably more deer struck there than anywhere from here to Montrose in one very small area. Every time I go by every year, I'm just amazed at the amount of deer that's being hit there. So the deer deal didn't hold up. I noticed in their presentation, they said HOA. Ridgway doesn't have an HOA. We have an architectural board. Why was he mentioning HOA when we don't have an HOA? Does anybody know the answer to that?
We
When
don't
are we
have-
going to develop an HOA?
We don't answer questions during public hearing. We appreciate your question. You'll need
We
to
we
wrap it up.
don't have a back and forth at this point.
Okay.
You're entitled to make points, ask questions if we can.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
That's okay. It's a formal process that's kind of close.
I saw that he said HOA. Is there going to be a cost to that? I would like to know that. The modular homes, I had 20-some trailers at one time, 25. I put them in, I put in lift station, I put in wells, I developed 20 acres. I had houses in my deal. A modular home, he said, was built in a factory. I don't think trailers are built in factories. I am against, and I think Preston said that we would not have modular homes in our community. Is that correct? Well, I can't ask that, I'm sorry. But modular homes, I was here the last time. And what I would like to state is that we want stick built or built in the community, not modular homes, okay?
Can give you another minute and you'll need to wrap it up.
Okay. If you go up to Vista Terrace, you'll notice that it has all of the things that Colorado does. It has the beautiful shrub. He said that, if I remember him over the telephone saying, he did not want it to look like Vista Terrace. Am I correct? Well, I'm sorry, I cannot answer that or ask that. Conservation of water, in the projects that they're doing now, they're burying the water and you're asking us to reserve our water. I think those are just some of the things that, there's so many questions on this. Our town is nice. It's really the reason that my wife and I moved here. It was beautiful. It had clear water. It was, the mountains had snow and everything. All of this is changing. And I think that if we add 230 more on top of this already, can I ask how many that the total amount would be with theirs and the rest of the additions? Can I ask that? What the total amount of?
We can come back to that question. We don't answer questions during public comment and I need you to wrap up now.
I think that pretty well sums it up. I do want to stress the water problem here. And that is something that I think that we definitely need to look at. But we need to limit the amount of people here.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
My name is Kuno Wollenweider. I live in South Mary Street in Ridgway. I wanted to share that I grew up in a house in Herleberg outside of Zurich on a 22% incline. And we were able to have half floors instead of whole floors, building it into the hillside. So that was a way to mitigate that steepness. And we were able to landscape, cover the house with trees from some sides. So I think it's possible. I'm not quite sure how desirable it is to live on a 22% incline because if you're, as you get older, I just can't quite see how it will go to 30 degrees. I'm thinking that might be not really desirable to live on the hillside that steep, knowing how difficult it was to live on 22% incline. That would be a cautionary tale from somebody that's experienced that steep of a living. Of course, we have short little areas in many towns that are steep, but I think you're inviting some erosion issues and some visual issues that are to be seen as you go through the process. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment? Any other public comment on Zoom? I'm then going to close public comment. We've determined that the letters that were submitted late are part of the record and don't need to be read. Yes? Okay. It's open for commissioners to ask questions, comments, deliberate. Let me know what you're thinking. Oh, would you like to go?
No, sorry, that was just clearing the throat. But if you and the rest of the commission so choose, we could try to respond in whole to some of the questions, some of the conversations. If the planning commission has similar concerns. So I would also just suggest there's an opportunity either as the applicant to respond to questions or myself, staff of the planning commission does have additional questions.
Okay. John, you want to go?
Well,
I have a few, if you're not ready.
I just assume to hear from other planning commission members. I'd also like to hear if anybody here wants either TJ or the developer to have an opportunity to respond to any of the public comments. If the, just to be clear, if we're going to have the developer respond to any public comments, we need to reopen the public comment period, but we do that for yeah.
Let's start with questions from the commissioners.
Okay.
I'll go. I have some. So I don't know if this will be TJ or the applicant, but on the roads, I'm wondering on the width, if they could at some time accommodate sidewalks if they were to be put in. Are they wide enough to do that as proposed?
I suspect what Commissioner Hart was talking about is that if we want to have a conversation, probably need to open up public comment again.
Well, I think her question was directed to you.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm not asking the public that comment. That question.
No. So short answer is it's a 60-foot right of way. We propose a lot can go in that. And that is one of the ongoing conversations that we'll be having about what can go in the right of way, how to do that, how to design it, both now and in the future, at a future time.
But as proposed, there are no sidewalks and it's not,
Correct.
it's gravel.
That's correct.
I like the fact that the ADUs have been limited. 20 seemed like a lot. The developer said that they were going to limit those to 5, and I'm assuming that would be on the larger lots. And also, it was stated by the developer that they would be for long-term rental and also regional employees. which answered another of my questions. It seems like the biggest concern, there were many concerns voiced from residents, but the biggest one seemed to be the egress issue. And so I'm asking you if I have this right. There's currently an egress issue with the number of units that are there. This would increase the issue.
Yes, if that subdivision came in today, a second subdivision access egress would be required.
And it's not being required right now because it's part of the original subdivision.
Correct.
By that additional egress, you're not referring to an emergency as in that blue line that was shown, that you're talking about a separate route besides Vista Terrace?
Out of Vista Terrace altogether.
To the highway.
To the highway. It's been discussed to somehow negotiate with a lot owner in Vista Terrace to come down through Ridgway, let's say, Ridgway Village, whatever you want to call it. That's been discussed many times in the past, but it would require pretty serious concession from a couple of landowners to allow the road to go between the lots. That's like the most logical place for you guys to me, but it's a pretty big ask, pretty big lot.
Understood, yeah. I mean, short of reworking Vista Terrace extensively, I don't think there's really another solution. That's not.
I think a lot of, I think a lot of the issues should go back to the fact that this development, the initial Vista Terrace development was annexed and approved back in the early 80s. And as I said before, it was a different time. Ridgway, much smaller population, much less, let's say, expertise in planning issues. Planning philosophy at the time was totally different. And as we've talked about many times, it never would have been approved anytime subsequent without another egress. It's just, it is kind of an accident waiting to happen. I agree with a couple of comments on that basis. And I think exacerbating that existing issue for this development is serious consideration.
Yeah, and it's not just a lack of potential planning in this area, where the strategies were affected. We've also seen the increase in the Telluride train, which is a lot of that traffic. And so you have to, there's a lot of other factors that have changed in there rather than just maybe we were thinking about it 40 years ago. So that's a potential as well. But there's other factors involved.
Well, I think your point's well taken. There's a whole lot more traffic on 550 now than there was back then. But the fact remains that even if there was the level of traffic we had back in 1980, the potential for serious wildfire creating a blockage that would keep the vast majority of residents without running helter-skelter across the landscape would still be. Sure. Okay.
I think that egress is my biggest issue. I like the suggestion of getting CDOT to lower the speed limit, but I think that is also an act of God because I know Telluride took over the maintenance of the highway in order to get the speed limit reduced on the spur into town.
They purchased the spur from CDOT.
I think they actually got some money to take it, but now they're eternally responsible for it.
And
I don't think we're going to be able to buy that section.
CDOT's mission is to keep traffic moving, and they also state that the way they determine speed limits is by doing traffic studies, and they set the speed limit to what the majority of traffic is going. So to get it lower to 45 would require that we somehow get everybody driving from Montrose to Ridgway to slow down to 45. And they got past kind of 24 there, and we all know how that is. So that's a fight to try to get there. I mean, it's a great idea. I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime.
Do any of the commissioners on Zoom have any comments or questions?
Well, I would reiterate my first concern, which is what we've been talking about, which is the lack of a functional egress as a safety issue. Something that's quoted in the presentation was 7-4-7A of the municipal code says all subdivisions shall conform to the minimum design standards of this section. I actually don't see how the sketch plan as it's presented fulfills a second egress for fire and safety issues, not just egress to Vista Terrace to Terrace Drive, but actually egress to safety.
Does the commission have any other substantial concerns?
One other thing I do have a concern on is we had a depiction of houses on the ridgeline. We had a statement from the developer that it won't look that way, but I do have concerns. The county has that overruling guideline of nothing on the ridgeline. Hasn't necessarily affected people building on inclines, but putting on the top of the ridgeline, I think is actually more what the UA code is. I'm curious, I don't believe we have anything specific along those lines, but I wouldn't necessarily want to see houses on the ridgeline. So
I share that concern. Well, the town of Ridgway, development within the town of Ridgway is not subject to the county's visual impact rules. I think it's only right that we respect them as part of the county. And I have serious concerns about those lots that are on top of the ridge. They are without doubt going to have structures that break the skyline and are quite obvious from the highways and coming Ridgway. I'm not going to do that. So I share the concern. I would also bring up, since we're bringing up concerns, Kelly Craig's letter. Chris mentioned, or Sarah, that her letter was supportive. I don't read her letter as being supportive. I read her letter as saying, if this development is approved because it's within the town of Ridgway, then here's what I recommend. But there's a specific paragraph at the end of the letter that says there is no way to truly mitigate the loss of winter-range habitat, but improving and/or conserving similar winter-range habitat in Erie County would be highly beneficial to wintering ungulates and would offset the negative impacts from the foreland subdivision. So she's clearly stating that she sees foreland subdivision as a negative impact on wildlife. She's basically just pointing out a few points that she'd like to see implemented if the development goes forward. So I just want to clarify that. I also would point out that Chris tried to deflect my concerns about the initial growth boundary, and just by saying that this development is rural in nature really doesn't fly, because to quote the section that describes the initial growth boundary, and this is property that's within the initial growth boundary, it says this boundary, quote unquote, this boundary includes areas that are contiguous to established parts of Ridgway that are already served by town services and to which utility extensions could logically and efficiently provide. The purpose of the IGB is to support the community's desire to grow in an orderly, logical, and sequential pattern outward from the existing town core. So I think it's obvious that this development being outside the IGB initial growth boundary doesn't come anywhere near that. It's, as we've been saying many times tonight, the lack of sewer up there, the fact that everything's on septics, was simply because there was no other option when the property was annexed and subdivided. it's a very different world now. And the addition of another 20 septic tanks and leach fields up there, I'm very concerned about. And that this idea that there would be an improvement district that would eventually support sewer being brought into it, whether aside from the comment that there would be lawsuits to not have to do it. It's just, the cost of it is so extreme. I don't see it ever happening. I have a serious problem with that many additional septic systems on top of what's already there. They're just, to me, there's so many examples of Vista Terrace. Because it was developed at the time it wasn't well thought out. And it works now for the people that are there. It works kind of minimally in some ways in terms of the water tank has to be pump fed. If those pumps go out, you guys who live up there don't have water. You don't have water for fire protection. That's far from ideal. The addition of an additional tank doesn't necessarily come close to addressing that issue. I just think that parcel could support a couple lots, 2 or 3 lots, but 20 lots is just from the existing layout and site conditions in this terrace. It just doesn't make sense to me. The 550 improvements that would be required by CDOT, that we know would be required, are incredibly expensive. And to try and spread the cost of those improvements that they would put on the developers amongst 20 lots, think what that's going to do to the cost of those lots and the cost of those homes. I share the concern about Eric, you describing moderate size homes as 2,500 to 4,800. I don't think a 4,800 square foot home is moderate. It means I totally applaud you for your efforts to make it green, all electric, solar powered. I can't stress strongly enough that was incredibly impressive that you guys are willing to do that. I just don't think it upsets the problematic nature of the development outside. So those are my concerns.
Just for clarification, do we know at what point CDOT becomes involved, if anything is built there, or is there a certain number?
They would be involved regardless. This is an access to their road. They would be the ones to determine whether or not a new access permit is needed and what improvement is needed. So an access permit is granted up to a certain number of trips per day at that intersection and the traffic flows. If the traffic study for this project shows that the anticipated projected trips and traffic pattern at that intersection exceeds what was previously approved, a new access permit would be required, and then improvements would be necessary.
Do we know what was previously approved?
We would, given the impact that has, it's not required by the code, but I suspect that we would include CDOT very early in this process to give the applicant a heads up of what will be required. So they would be involved heavily at the preliminary plat phase.
Where I'm going with this is it's not sounding like there's enough support, but what might there be support for is what I was trying to allude to. And I don't know that we have enough information to get there.
I was going to point out that I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, either Preston or TJ, individual homes, a building permit taken out for the individual home, they would require a new traffic study, but any new subdivision would. So whether it was a subdivision with 2 or 3 lots in it, or 20, it's going to trigger a review by CDOT, I believe.
And all of, yes, it depends on what the access permit is approved for. So if 3 additional lots were included, so there was a subdivision that was previously approved,
that might fit under the existing.
Correct.
Yeah. And I don't really have that handy tonight.
No.
Can the developer say something? Can I open them? Yes, go ahead.
I'd like to respond to some of the concerns.
Just 1 second, please. Even though he's the applicant?
It's still public comment.
They open it up if you choose to allow the applicant to speak. So it's up to you.
And then is it open or just for the applicant?
It's up to you.
It's up to you.
Okay, I'm opening it to allow the applicant to speak.
All right, thank you. I don't know if I can hit everything, but I'd like to try and get some clarity here and possibly reach some consensus that the intersection, number one, we would certainly be willing to, with conditional approval to move to the next step, we would be willing to work with the town to try to solve and reach a reasonable alternate access, egress, not access, but egress. That's something that I think we've looked at in depth. And obviously, we're going to solve an existing problem that already exists in Vista Terrace, but conditionally, we would be willing to take a look at that and see if we can solve that problem, because I clearly recognize that it's an issue and I possibly see some solutions. And that's something that I would like to be considered. Regarding the intersection, I've already requested a traffic study. It's already been performed and it's been sent to CDOT. So obviously we're going to adhere to whatever CDOT, we defer to CDOT. But in preparation for this, what I did beyond having Buckhorn, which is more than capable of doing a traffic study, we hired a traffic engineer who's a specialist in the field. So it was I think the question was asked earlier if it was going to be a neutral party. And that's exactly what we anticipated. And that's exactly what I did. So CDOT will take a look at that. But I want to point out, as much as it's a concern, and I'm certainly not trying to minimize safety in any way, it's the business I'm in. But if you go north to Route 10, there's exponentially more traffic. It's not even comparable to, it's minute. We've looked at this. Going into Millionaires Valley and going up 10, Owl Creek Pass, the intersection is so much busier. With the new improvements, there's a shoulder lane to make it right, but if you're coming south on the highway on 550, there's nothing. There's no turning lane there. Let me then fast forward to 24, the north artery of the town. There is nothing if you're going north on 550 to make a left into 24, and subsequently there's nothing if you're coming south. That's the main artery out of the north end of town. Point being, there is so much more traffic at those intersections as opposed to Terrace Drive. It's incalculable. So food for thought, we're going to defer to CDOT, and we're willing to take a hard look and financially try and solve the issue that already exists in a subdivision that has a problem and hasn't done anything to fix it. But we'll take a look at it based on being an applicant and trying to do the right thing on behalf of the neighborhood and the town. With regard to wildlife, because I love wildlife and I want to make a point. This is fascinating. This is from Raquel Schwarzkopf, the Erie County assessor. There's 177,273 private acres of land in Uray County. An absolute paradise, unbelievable. Makes me want to cry. Of those 177,000 acres, 132,188 are in ag status. That's of private lands. So there's 177,000 acres of private lands in the county. Out of those, 74%, 132,000 are in ag status. My point is that Ridgway is 1.8 square miles. Ridgway, town of Ridgway, local government lands is 209 acres. There's very, very minimal amount for development, but it's within the town limits. It's not wildlife habitat. I contest that. You know, is it a corridor? Are there mule deer predominantly there? Absolutely, but Millionaires Valley, County Road 5, Miller Mesa, on and on. on. That's wildlife habitat, double RL, J bar M. That's where the wildlife habitat is. That's where the calving takes place. Just wanted to address that with regard to it. It's hard to limit development within the town limits based on wildlife habitat. And that's the point I'm trying to make, as much as I'm a wildlife advocate. So I've addressed that, but I think conditionally we can sit down with staff and administration and try and look at, because there are ways out. You know, there's 10, there's 12, there's Mall Road. There's ways to solve and get out of Vista Terrace. And that consideration I would like the commission to consider, because we're trying to reach a compromise and solve a problem. Solving problems is what we want to do on behalf of the town. And there's certainly demand to move forward and get more data. So I think that's basically what I'd like for some consideration on. And thank you respectfully for letting me respond.
Thank you. Closing public comment.
I think the point you need to understand is you had your opportunity to make comments. We had opportunity to respond. If everybody gets to respond every time, we're going to be here all night, and it just doesn't work. I'm sorry. I think you guys have, those of you who want to respond, have had plenty of opportunity to speak. It's the chair's call, so she can treat it if she likes, but at this point she's closed it. Okay.
So back to the commissioners. Maybe it's TJ. It doesn't sound like there's enough support on the commission, and please correct me if I'm wrong, to approve this as presented.
We haven't heard from every commissioner, so I just want to be clear. Ms. Nelson hasn't opined, Mr. Emelson hasn't opined.
I didn't know he was on.
He's on Zoom, so.
He didn't respond to roll call, so we didn't even know he was here.
Yeah, just, okay, just letting you know, I think it'd be good for the record to show.
Thanks for letting us know. That's the first we've heard that he's even.
Yeah, glad to know. Jennifer, did you want to comment any more on this?
Not at this time, no.
Thank you. Bill?
No, I said my say on my concern with egress. I'm done.
Thomas, would you like to comment or have any questions?
You're on mute.
We can't.
Maybe that's why we didn't know he was, because we can't hear.
Yeah, right.
Thomas, we can't hear you. You're not muted, but there's something going on with your audio.
While he figures that out, are you prepared to pass this?
I've stated my concerns. I'd like to make sure everybody gets a chance.
Okay, I'm gonna let him if he can. Can he chat? If he can't speak.
Thomas,
Russ?
are you working on it? Maybe you could call in.
Yeah, he's on a phone.
Is your phone muted?
It is now.
No, still can't hear you.
See,
Well, if you're able to figure it out, I bet you can, Thomas.
Can you chat?
We don't have the chat function.
Are we ready to move forward until we hear from him?
so I guess the other thing I wanted to say is I wanted to kind of back in on some of John's comments before. I mean, we kind of hit on some of them before, but the egress, the ridge line. There's a couple other things that some citizens have written in about that I thought were valid concerns for the area. So we saw the video of somebody actually trying to cross the street, maybe played up a little bit, but still, it's a busy intersection. So There is a bike trail apparently that shows at the end of the Combs video, it comes up on the side there. Not a good route to get people or bikes across that route. Additionally, there were comments about the number of animals that get killed. I understand the wildlife concerns, and you're saying it's not necessarily this place. There's a lot of them come through that area. There is a lot of carnage in that area. I've had to pay some insurance costs because of that area.
A county deputy was killed by running into a deer on his motorcycle there about 10 years ago. So that's a major wildlife.
So those are some other concerns that I have with the area as well. I love a lot of the things that you've done with the solar power, a lot of the approaches you've taken on this. But I do have some concerns with both the density and the concerns around egress, what you say you're willing to work, as well as the CDOT study, as well as, is this a place for an underpass or an overpass for some pedestrian and wildlife crossing?
Absolutely.
So I have some concerns on those issues as well.
And I would just add, I appreciate your comments, Eric. I think that, your point on County Road 10, County Road 24, well taken, but it's not relevant to the fact that this is a Town of Ridgway project with the Town of Ridgway Road median 550, and that's our job, is to deal with that. And it's a serious issue.
I think the question I would ask if I can is just,
Actually, for the record, we have,
sorry.
no
we have
problem.
to adhere to protocol, so.
No problem.
Did Thomas manage to get on that?
Apparently not.
He's working on it.
Chair, did you have, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Yeah, I wanted to open this up to TJ and see if there's enough clarification on this. I'm feeling like maybe not. Like, my biggest concern is egress, but it sounds like there's other concerns, and I want to make sure that staff and the applicant have that information before we close this.
Sure, so I'm not exactly sure what the desire of the commission is, but at this point, there's potentially two options: either vote to deny or vote to continue. What I've jotted down are some major concerns based on a commission conversation is intersection with 550, both from what I would refer to as background traffic. So the traffic on 550 that's increased, as well as the traffic coming into, as well as wildlife. There's a lot going on there in the trail. So kind of not just, and I think with all of that, it goes beyond just CDOT per se. There's a lot of operations going on there. Secondary egress to the whole subdivision, do some deeper analysis there. Density concerns probably play into all of those issues as well. And then I did hear earlier the OWTS,
The septic.
Yeah.
It's being a temporary, a quote unquote temporary, but actually being kind of in perpetuity, just given the constraints. Those are kind of the four big things that I've heard. If that helps maybe summarize some of the conversation.
Did you have the secondary egress in there as well?
He did.
Okay, just making sure I didn't.
And we did mention the ridge line. That was a concern.
The original.
And I just like to state that I understand that the egress is an existing problem, but allowing a lot more units there is going to amplify that problem.
I agree.
It's not necessarily,
It's not your problem, but it's your problem that you're trying to develop in that subdivision where the problem exists. So two sides.
Thank you.
Here's Thomas has his hand.
What's that?
Somebody has their hand.
Hi there, can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. This is silly. I'm talking on the phone, but looking at you on my computer. Good evening, everyone. I just probably would end up reiterating pretty much everything I've heard from everyone this evening. I think that I'm certainly torn here in the fact that, I think the town needs more development to provide more housing, and I want to support the developer and their progressive approach to using alternative energy and developing that area. But as John Clark has also mentioned, I think that based on the infrastructure and the layout of the current subdivision, the impact of this type of project, which certainly is probably within the restrictions, limitations of what's allowable, but it's obviously going to add a lot of impact that everyone is discussing. And clearly, if you read the enormous amount of letters that have been submitted, there's a very consistent theme going through there, mostly, of course, dealing with the highway, which we've all discussed now, which is certainly a concern. And then the secondary egress, which of course has also been discussed. I do think that the wildlife thing is a tough one too, because we know there's a lot of that, but I also agree with the developer that, we have to have some development within the town, and I'm sure hopefully the animals will maybe make some readjustment. But there's several issues here that make this proposal at the moment problematic for me to approve, even though I assume that something will eventually get put there, and that the developer certainly and the owner certainly have a right to develop something there. But it seems to me that unfortunately there may have to be a little bit of going back to the drawing board and revising it based on some of the input we've had tonight. But I really appreciate all the public comments and as well as comments from the fellow commissioners tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas.
Thanks, Thomas. Any other commissioners have anything?
Okay.
Hey, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to, I just realized one other thing that I forgot to include. Just as was brought up by the developer owner about some of the other intersections further up north. I want to remind everyone also that we are currently now starting the Triangle subdivision project there, just south of this intersection that is already potentially problematic. And I've always had reservations about that project with this same issue regarding access for both directions and how they're going to mitigate that. And I still, to this day, have not seen something that I think is really suitable or adequate, but the project is still going to move forward. And I hope that they and CDOT will have some luck working it out. But it seems like, this whole stretch of highway is suffering a lot from the excess new, amount of traffic and all the new development that's using this as the main artery to get about. And I don't know what we can do to really resolve a lot of that, aside from widening the road and all of that, which are things that we don't necessarily want to do. But it does seem like that, the infrastructure is getting stressed, regardless if this project goes in or not. We have this issue out there, and I just wanted to remind everyone of that. And once again, thank you.
Thanks, Thomas. I'd say that it's a good point, but it's irrelevant to the project in front of us. It's not, we're not considering the subdivision, we're considering this project, Vista Terrace. And I'll just say again, Vista Terrace is a very unique subdivision in the town of Ridgway. It's a gooseneck off the original core of town. And I understand why it was developed back in 1980 and it's been subdivided. The views up there are astounding. Certainly made sense back then. They're just the issues are ongoing with it as it exists now. And I think it's what's really tough for me is that you guys are trying to do a really 21st century thoughtful green development. And I appreciate that 1000%.
The continuance based on the input that was given would be fair and light of what's going on. I feel to take that input and work through.
Well, I would consider a continuance under the conditions. I don't know if I can put conditions on a continuance, but the conditions I would want to see would be that you guys actually include in your sketch plan, at least a sketch plan of a secondary easement, a way to deal with the wildlife issues, because I understand your point about wildlife in town, but Vista Terrace isn't a typical town development. And that was partly your point, Chris, is that it's a rural development, but it's within the town of Ridgway, so we have to deal with that. So I'd like to see you come back with a new plan, fewer lots, definitely address the egress, address the traffic. I mean, I was going to go through the conditions in the land use code, the subdivision code 7-4-5, A1, talks about conformance with the master plan and zoning regulations. That right off the bat hits on the fact that this is outside the IGB. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get past that, because unless what we bring back is significantly scaled back, I don't see how we can. I almost think, and commissioners weigh in if you feel strongly about this, we almost need to realign the initial growth boundary to include this property moving forward. Just otherwise, we're just like denying that this portion of our land use code in our master plan, not land use code, but master plan, that talks very clearly about what the IGB is for, and this property is outside that. So that's a tricky one. I'd like to see more specifics about how you're going to deal with the water, getting enough water up there and making sure it's going to be there if there's an emergency. Sewage issue, the septic tank issue, maybe you could convince me with a soil study that there was enough support in that alluvial soil to be able to handle that many more septic systems. Those are my main points, and it's a lot.
Put those conditions in the continuance.
What's the feeling of the rest of the commission? Is open to a continuance with those conditions?
I'd be open.
I'd be open to a continuance. Yeah.
I would as well, I guess, if that's what would help move things forward.
We'll come back and do this all over again.
Staff, have to say on that?
Staff, you guys have any concerns, comments?
No, I think we got some clear direction this evening. That seems to be consistent with staff's review and some other additional stuff. Got clarity. But that's I don't know that there are conditions per se on the continuance. I think it's the continuance is for the reason to address the concerns brought up in the hearing. Right. I would recommend a couple sidebar conversations with the applicant through this. 3 to 4 months would be desired.
So you feel like the continuance is appropriate? It's acceptable.
That is the commission's prerogative.
I like the idea of giving it 3 or 4 months for you guys to work together and get some of these details worked out. And another quirk of this whole process is we can't vote on the continuance unless you ask for it. So I assume you're asking.
Yes, sir.
4 months would be December.
Works for me. Good.
We just think, where would that fall? Is that? Yeah, just trying to make sure this is like a Christmas day or something.
This 4 months in.
I like the things that.
27.
We have to.
We probably push that into January. So
January?
we'd probably push it to January because it's like 2 days after Christmas.
Well, no, we should schedule back to the first week of January. So we're probably talking the first part of January.
But when you make that motion, it would still be considered the December meeting because it gets moved to January. Otherwise, you're looking at the January planning meeting, which is at the end of the month, right?
Right. Okay. Well, I will move that we continue this sketch plan application for 4 Winds for them to address with staff's help the concerns that have been raised tonight. Record, and that the developer not come back to us with a revised sketch plan until at the very earliest, the December planning commission meeting, which is almost definitely going to be the first or second week of January.
Second.
Can we get a roll call? We've got a second. We got Russ. Did you get that? So we're ready for a roll call.
Okay. Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Bliss,
Aye.
Meyer,
Aye.
Nelson,
I,
Mayor Clark,
Aye.
and Chairperson Montague.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks for all your time.
Thanks for the-
Thanks to all the public time too.
Yeah,
It's
thanks,
been a lot of
everybody.
meetings, so thank you.
Good discussion. Thanks for everybody keeping it civil.
Thank you very much.
Definitely.
Chair, I recommend we take a 5-minute recess so that we can clear out.
So we can take a 5-minute recess and then I'll need you to. So I'm announcing that now. No, it's Bill. Anyways, if anyone's listening, I'm recusing myself. We're gonna take a 5-minute break and John's gonna take the next item.
Hello. We have more to do tonight as the planning commission, so please take your conversations outside. Thank you for coming. We're gonna take a 5-minute break to allow you guys to clear out.
I don't have a lot of John. Yeah, probably. I went over to Jeff's house.
Joe.
Michelle, what did you
Excuse me?
We agreed to
Continue. Yeah, he asked for a continuance, so it's continued to the December meeting. Yeah. The holidays. So we'll just do it in June.
do it the first or second.
No.
Gives them a chance to come back.
Yeah.
That would be at the earliest, they could take longer.
Yes.
That's okay.
I kind of thought that too. What's the line? Aaron, what'd you do for myself? What about John Charles? Steve Jobs in his place. Meeting in person. I saw that. I'm like, she must, it's like Santa Claus.
So when the dog got in it, that's not.
What's that? I'll do that. Yeah. Probably. I don't know. Oh, yeah. She was down with Charles. She went to Charles Street there for job. I went home for lunch one day and he calls me and said, where are you? I'm home. I'm near by. The darling just called me. I figured you'd be right behind me. I'm like, no. I'm at home.
So she discussed it all.
Yeah. I feel a little irresponsible, but then she's 14 and that's what she's been doing. And that's her thing. I'm like,
I don't think that's her fault.
let's just tell her if something happens to her, everyone's gonna be like, well, it's your own fault. I'll take it like that. Yeah. Yeah.
I know I believe he's trying to make Black Lives in the world.
So. You okay? I was hesitant to do that. I said I wasn't gonna do that. Yeah, I had to
Nice to meet you. You ever have questions or want to talk about anything? Okay, excellent.
I hear you.
Thank you.
Later, Miss. Did you get it? Charlie was informed, he didn't. So does that mean it keeps going on? No.
Yesterday, I work. So I don't think that it's in more that. I think it's small. I know, it's not bad. Good job. Thank you for helping.
You probably like, oh my God, it happened.
I know.
I took a picture and sent it to the person. She was on.
Yeah, they did really nice.
My friend Jeff's like, oh, that like really deep. I'm like,
It's like two Kristens and she's a giant.
oh my God.
Yeah, so. Well, we're glad that happened.
Yeah, it's moving in supposedly Labor Day weekend.
I'm excited to be.
Shipping out of the house, like, guy was across the street, came over and made the fridge at the front porch. I was like, yeah, you're just gonna push and I'm gonna pull. It's on my client's house. I'm like, I don't think you want me to be your helper. You're gonna get hurt. And the guy came over and helped. So anyway, look, the plumber comes to the he sent the box back. 3 inches. So the upper cabin's supposed to be get rained down. And he's like, you know, all upside down. I was like, you know what? How did you screw up? That was the place, because anywhere else you're pulling out countertops.
Just because it's such a.
Yeah, but I have to go to school tomorrow.
Oh, the first day, just took 5 minutes. The first day.
No, it's first week. Well, it's actually my first day for a lot of because it's a walk schedule, so just some kids. It was there.
No, you can't go fast, not going up. Okay, for those following at home, we're gonna start this back up. Shouldn't be too difficult. Oh, I have to sit on that side. What am I doing?
You have to recuse yourself from this?
Yeah. I have a financial interest in the property.
We can
It
tell you.
almost seems silly, but.
Well, everyone actually has a financial interest in subdividing property. You're weirdly involved in the process, but whether it's I actually get the subdivision, you might have just got the present. Go sit over there. Oh, you don't actually have a financial stake in the subdivision.
No, I know.
Well, I'm in the same.
You need to sold the rest of it, but like the subdivision itself is not interesting.
I know.
So I mean.
The town accepted the sewer, but not at the subdivision.
They like to.
Which is why the process is weird, because
I
the
don't-
city may not accept the sewer. So.
Yeah.
Because the mayor's supposed to get it's supposed to be considered, but actually it's a weird liability.
So Bill, you about ready to get us going again?
Yep.
Bill, do you want to run this or you want me to? This is John.
Hey, John, since you're there, it'd be easier. I can do it from here, but probably functionally easier for you to.
Makes sense to me. So let me go back. So we are back in session at 8:25. Chair Michelle Montague has recused herself because of her interest in this next item. And considering that the vice chair is on Zoom, I'm going to run this item. So this is item number 2 under public hearings. It's an application for final plat. Town of Ridgway, block 20, lots 16 through 18, in historic residential. Applicant Beth Lakin, owner Beth Lakin. TJ, you gonna give us a staff report?
Sure am. So, yeah, what we have is an amended plat. This evening, the property is generally located south of Frederick Street, north of Charles, and west of and adjacent to North Laura. Yeah, just here's the process that we'll go through just to remind your a public hearing. And so we have background, Preston. As mentioned, the owner is Beth Lakin. The legal description of the property is lots 16, 17, and 18, block 20, town of Ridgway. We've had this conversation a few times, but just to reiterate and clarify that all three of those lots are one interest, and therefore when you split that interest, it warrants the subdivision. So that's kind of where we get to this process. The zoning of the property is currently HR, historic residential, and it's not being proposed to change. All application materials have been submitted. The public hearing has been notified as required in the Ridgway municipal code. So that gets us over to the project summary. So the request is to take, as I mentioned, one lot of interest into two lots. The thing that made this project a little bit more complicated is the sewer. And we'll get to that a little bit later on, but it did require an extension of sewer to be able to serve lot 2. There is an existing home on lot 1 and accessory buildings on lot 2. You can see on the slide there, the existing home and lot 1 are on the north side. And then lot 2 is on the southern, essentially third of the current parcel. Okay. So here are the elements that we're going to analyze. I'll go through each of those now. So first, land use is currently, as I mentioned, it's a single family home. The current home will conform with the zoning district standards. That means lot size, setbacks, and things like that. I would just mention that in the first, in the staff review comments, the front setback is not identified. We don't necessarily have a concern with it, but that is one that we just want to make sure and confirm it meets the 15-foot setback. The new lot 2 doesn't also meet the minimum setbacks, and then a building permit would be required for a new home on lot 2 or any construction on lot 2. Okay. The dimensional standards, again, here's just a quick overview of the requirement and the proposed dimensional standards for each lot. So I won't necessarily go through all that right now, but they are in the staff report. That's the next. Looking at access, access to lot 1 is currently obtained via the driveway to North Laura through lot 2. And so it's mentioned in the staff report and in the staff comments that that's an item that will have to be resolved just so that legal access is provided. So that may come through closing off that driveway, removing it functionally, or dedicating an easement over lot 2 to lot 1 to provide that legal access there. So again, that's in the staff comment letter. And then lot 2, access will be determined with the future building permit. It could, depending on how it develops, it could either access off the alley or North Laura Street. I must have just copied and pasted a bunch of things in there.
I was like, wow, now I have to hit the road.
Yeah, that's the one. No, just had to delete that slide. That's
Too many plates in here, TJ?
yes, yes. You see, I copied the one and forgot to delete it. So here you go. The utilities, as we mentioned. Water is currently for the current and future lot will be served off the 6-inch existing water line in North Laura. Sewer service, the current home that would be on the future lot 1 is served through the sewer line in the alley. The sewer line, it's hard to see on here, but the sewer line, the current manhole as it existed when we received this in the alley went to about that, the first original town lot there and needed to be extended to the south to reach lot 2 so that it could meet the standards for a 90-degree or perpendicular service line. And so that is the main reason why this application has been continued for a few months. And I believe now it is there. The construction has been completed. And now we're ready to proceed. So sewer service from both lots will be served off that water, that sewer line in the alley. Sorry, Preston, go ahead. We still have not received any public comment through this process. And so with that, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the Lake and Arnold amended plat to the Ridgway Town Council with the following conditions. 1, the applicant shall address all outstanding planning and comments identified in the review letter dated August 26, 2022 to the satisfaction of town staff prior to the application being scheduled for consideration of town council. And 2, the sewer line extension shall be completed and accepted by the town prior to a building permit being issued for lot 2.
Okay, thanks, TJ.
Yep.
Anybody on Planning Commission have a question for TJ or Preston on this one?
I do not.
Pretty simple. Been waiting on this one for a while. All right, I need to open up public comment.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. You guys have anything?
Yeah, actually, the biggest piece is what is considered, as I look through the review letter from staff, what is considered closing off that driveway? Because the plan long-term is for me to build a garage off the alley and I have parking on the alley. I could quit using the driveway tomorrow. After having done a sewer extension for a project that was intended to be selling to someone affordably to build another small home, can I put a railroad tie and drive a piece of rebar through it? Like what is closing off the driveway? I understand the town's policy on that, but that was never in any point in this process intended to be the driveway that I would maintain and keep. So that's my big question. We'll figure out moving the shed, we could do that, but I had an excavator at my property last week and didn't know that I maybe should scrape the driveway away. So what is closing it? That's my question.
Take a rake to it.
No, I've tried to clean up edges of it, but it's not good.
Go ahead.
If I may. The concern is not so much the physical presence of it or the access per se. It is that at some point, sooner than later, once this gets recorded, it's a separate parcel. And so it would essentially be trespassing if it continued to be used. So from my perspective, I don't think that, I think it's just a word. I think it's.
Okay, because it
needs to happen.
Makes sense to me. Yeah.
Unless you wanted to use it, we would want an easement. Other than that, I think it's just.
If you have no plans to use it going forward, just stop using it now.
I mean, whatever, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not even sure you need.
I mean, I don't think I have to. I think I could park in Hillary and Micah's driveway if they told me I could park in Hillary and Micah's driveway. But I'm just saying, whatever I need to do to like, I just don't want to do another physical thing of construction.
It doesn't sound like you need to. It doesn't sound like it. It sounds like you could park there until such time as the lot you've created is starting to be built on.
Okay.
You have an agreement with your neighbor to not park.
I mean, I can park in the alley. It's fine. I park there 30% of the time anyway.
Yeah. So I think that consensus is unless somebody on the planning commission feels differently, that you don't have to actually do anything physically to meet that condition. It's more just awareness of it.
Yeah.
That it's in the record.
Right. That's fine. I was trying to get clarification from
Yeah.
staff and I was just like, I don't know what I need to do here. Okay. So yeah, other than that, it should be fairly straightforward. This was the spirit of the code changes that we made, was taking a bigger lot and making it something that someone could buy and live on. So.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any public comment?
No. I'm just testing the process. Michelle Montague, 380 North Cora, and I'd like to say that I'm in favor of this project.
Surprise. Anyone else? No one on Zoom, no hands up? It's all right. Okay, I'm going to close the public comment period. I'll bring it back up here for discussion and motion.
No discussion on my part, so I will move to approve the application against the applicable town standards. Staff recommends
You got to recommend,
approval.
yeah, recommend approval to the town council.
It's up here on the screen.
Okay.
I'll second.
I move to recommend approval of the Lake and Arnold amended plat to the town of Ridgway Town Council with the following conditions. One, the application will address all outstanding planning comments identified in the review comment letter dated August 26, 2022 to the satisfaction of the town staff prior to the application being scheduled for consideration of town council. Two, the sewer line extension shall be completed and accepted by the town prior to a building permit being issued for lot 2.
I heard somebody. Go ahead, Jennifer, is that you?
Oh, yeah, I second that.
Okay, motion's been seconded. We need a roll call vote, please.
Okay. Commissioner Nelson,
Aye.
Bliss,
Aye.
Meyer,
Aye.
Nelson,
I,
Mayor Clark.
Aye.
That's it.
Okay, thanks.
Get your champagne and stuff?
No, because I still have to get the plat fixed. That's how I feel about this. Thank you all. Thank
All right, you're welcome.
Thanks for your patience.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah.
And the chair will rejoin the commission and take us to item number 3.
Not working.
Doesn't work that way.
Item 3 is a continuance request. The application is a sketch plan, location lot 3, PUD Ridgway Land Company subdivision, zone general commercial, applicant to build Ridgway LLC, owner Ridgway Land Company. TJ, would you like to speak to this? I'm sorry, I'm still trying to scroll on my laptop with my finger.
Sure, yep. So as you mentioned, this was an application that for a sketch plan, it was continued a couple of times, I believe, and lastly, July for 30 days. So that's what brought us here today. The applicant is still diligently working through previous comments and discussion points. And has requested that the application be continued once again to September 27th, the September Planning Commission meeting, and staff agrees with that. So, I guess that.
Not a lot to discuss.
Still have to go through the motions.
Yeah, I'm just still scrolling.
Still trying to find.
All right.
Do the commissioners have any comments?
Bill, we have to go through the
Yeah.
procedure before you can make a motion.
Do the commissioners have any comments or questions?
No.
I'll open it to public comments. Does the public have any comment on this continuance?
I think actually for formalities.
The record should show that the applicant is not here to make comments on their behalf.
No applicant, so I did not open it to the applicant. I've opened it to public.
Is there one online?
There is.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Joe Nelson is the applicant, is online.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't
Joe, do you
know
have
that.
anything
Joe, do
you
you
wanna
want to
add?
speak?
Sorry.
Hey, I'm in charge now.
I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes,
can
we
hear you.
can.
Oh, great. Well, thank you very much. I won't take much of your time. As you know, Doug McFarland passed away, and we're We have submitted and been working with TJ and Preston with a lot of our new ideas. And we'll be ready to present at the next meeting.
Great, thank you.
And we appreciate your time.
We also have a raised hand from the public.
So now I will continue at the opening of public comment, and the public comment can commence.
Jack Petroselli.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I'm wondering with in the shadow of a moratorium, this has already been continued 2 or 3 different times and continues to be continued. I wonder how that appears in a moratorium like this. Will this just get continued and continued and continued, or I understand that Mr. McFarland died and we share the empathy for that, but isn't this the 3rd or 4th continuance on this?
I don't believe so. And Jack, the process is that the moratorium only applies to new submissions. So anything that's in the pipeline that is submitted, at the very least, a sketch plan such as this development, they go through the process just like they did before. So, and you know, they can ask for continuances repeatedly. It's up to us to say whether or not we want to allow them. But in this case, I don't have a problem. But I think this is only the 2nd continuance.
This will be the 2nd. And if I can just add something to that, Jack, the emergency ordinance enacting the moratorium, there's a section providing for exceptions to the moratorium. That's in section 3A, reads any pending application which was submitted on or before the enactment of this ordinance. And this fits that and falls within the category of a pending application. So just wanted to provide some more definition there.
Okay, well, thanks for the information.
Thanks, Jack.
Is there any other public comment? I will close public comment. Commissioners have anything? Thank you.
I'll move to approve the continuance to September 27th.
I'll second that.
Roll call vote, please.
Okay, Commissioner Ellison,
Aye.
Lisk,
Aye.
Meyer,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Mayor Clark,
Aye.
and Chairperson
Aye. Next, I need approval of the minutes for the July 26th meeting.
So moved.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
I believe it's a roll call vote again.
Okay, and Commissioner Ellison will be abstaining. So we'll start with Commissioner Lisk,
Aye.
Meyer,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Mayor Clark,
Aye.
and Chairperson Lund.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you. I would just like to thank all of the commissioners for their intelligent comments and, you know, being aware of what's going on. That there, I think we'll see more of these kind of tough things, and it's really helpful that everybody seems to be well informed, because otherwise we're kind of caught up here going, you know, so thank you for the efforts that you make. Always good to have people here in person, but I do understand that people are traveling, and, you know, Zoom allowed us to have a quorum tonight. Otherwise we might not have, because it's 4 people and there's 3 of us here. That's what I have. Does anyone else have any updates?
I do have, I will be I'll be absent for the September meeting, back in October.
Okay, so that's 2 people I know of that are absent for the September meeting. So let's see, so we need either Jennifer or Thomas will well, I don't know. I'm assuming you guys will be here. 2 people are already absent, so I guess only 1 more could be absent for us to have a quorum.
Jennifer Franz notified us that she wouldn't be here for the September meeting.
Would not be.
Yeah, so that's Bill and Jennifer Franz that aren't going to be here. So just letting everyone know, if you think you are going to be gone for that, please let Preston know as soon as possible so that we can reschedule, because we certainly don't want people to be prepared and showing up for a meeting if we don't have enough people to run it.
I will be there for the September meeting.
Thank you.
I'll be there as well.
Great. So we have more than enough people, assuming Russ and John are here.
Will you guys both be here in person?
I probably won't, but I will be available and I'll make my mic work a little better next time.
Okay,
I'll be in town, so I'll be there.
great.
Does anyone else have anything? TJ, you want to share something with us? Yes.
So this morning we had our monthly development projects check-in with Preston, myself, Joanne, and in case anybody didn't know that, we do meet pretty much monthly, the week before planning commission, to go through everything. And we do have a lot on the plate. One of the things that we did talk about this morning was proceeding with the moratorium and what that's looking like. So we thought we'd have just a quick opportunity to share with you all what our thoughts are and how to proceed. So obviously you all, well, I assume all of you know that the reason for the moratorium is to address some of the process and some of the standards in Title 7 planning and zoning section of the code. And so we, my team and I put together kind of a rough outline of a potential process for the code that we've used in many other communities and is well received. It's restructuring, reorganizing, but not really much more than that. I think it makes it a little bit more simple layout, easy to follow. But what we, I think, really wanted to touch on tonight was that in order to keep this process moving in a timeline, try to get something in that 5 months. We're looking at 8, I think, but we really want to try and shoot for 5 is what we're going for. We need to probably have a special meeting in September where we can kind of present our thoughts, how we're suggesting to address some of the concerns and the items, and with the ultimate goal not to solve all the world's problems, but to identify them so that at least staff has better direction and clarity so that we can, as in terms of we have a little bit more leash so that we can make some headway in such a short period of time, and then bring something back to you all in November, December timeline.
Is there something you'd like us to do to prepare for that? Do you want to send anything out ahead of time that we would review, or
I don't believe so, simply because we don't.
Just getting started.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, put some thought to that. We can come up with, obviously we'll be working through and sending you some info beforehand, right?
Well, we did the landscape thing with you, so I would assume it's a similar process.
I would say, good point. I would say it's similar, but we're talking about the entirety of chapter 7, so it's a hefty task.
A little more than land, a little more than trees.
Yeah,
It's
so to be candid, we're talking about a full-on repeal of what's in chapter 7, and a brand new proposal that's getting into the weeds a little bit. But we met today. TJ did a great job presenting what he recommended for a scope. Bo, Joanne, and I collectively said this looks fantastic. Let's go to the planning commission, make sure we're all in agreement, which is the impetus for setting a special meeting in September, whenever it works for everybody. But I think the sooner rather than later would be best, so that TJ and his crew can, or so that we can get a thumbs up, and then or some modification to it, so TJ and his crew can go to work, if that makes sense, and then come back to planning commission eventually with proposed modifications to chapter 7, a new chapter based on the scope, and follow the process from there. So that's what we're looking at. Sorry, I just repeated everything you just said.
Can I just ask that we include something somewhat similar to Ridgway to Uray County's ridgeline,
So.
potentially in that, if that applies?
Potentially, again, I mentioned it when we went through the moratorium, that we're trying to stick to process.
Okay.
And by doing that, because right now the code is so intertwined with process standard and administration, what we're trying to do and why we think it's going to be a repeal replace is because we just want to separate all those things
Right.
into their separate places.
Okay.
We certainly can, and one of the things that we will be doing is kind of highlighting those elements that should be done later on, because one of the big things that we're going to need to come to you all in September for is, hey, here are the things that we've talked about. We might be able to do 3 or 4 of them in this scope, right? And so, what there's clerical changes that are, let's just move things around and technically clean it up, right? That is not all that impactful, if you will, from a public standpoint. Then we have major changes that probably have to have some work session discussion, but then you have policy changes. And so I want to be really careful to not, wherever we can, not move into that major policy change component, just because that delays the whole project.
Sure.
Now, if we all say, hey, you know what, these are important enough to do, then by all means. And that's what we'll be presenting at that work session, say, here's what we've identified so far. What do you think?
We'll need to prioritize that.
Correct. And so that's just, again, some of the big things that we talked about, water, ridge lines, some of the other design standards could be major projects unto themselves. So I just want to be cautious.
Totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah,
well, at the same time, though, my understanding of doing the moratorium was to address some of these things. So I'm concerned that I don't want this 5-7 month, whatever it is, to just be about process. It needs to include some of these major.
But that's what he said, but we get to prioritize it. Like, just because the ridge line came up tonight, it's like, water is pretty important. I think a little more important.
The ridge line one is relatively simple. We just insert a paragraph that says we're respecting the county's break the skyline regs, and we will recognize the same criteria they use. I mean, it probably has to be more complicated than that, but not a lot.
Right.
I just, maybe I misunderstood what you were saying, but I was under the impression that this was going to be more than just policy, or more than just process. It was going to definitely involve some policy, but I understand the need to focus that.
Yeah, and I think we certainly can. There are some, but and by all means, that's what our team does. We write codes too, so it's not like outside of the realm. I just want to be really respectful of the timing. And then the other thing is that with moratoriums, you can always come back and amend it based on things. So that I think is what we want to look at in that September meeting. What's the scope and what's the potential timeline? We have a lot of projects already applied for, but we have a lot sitting and just that we're holding back too. So we have some sense of urgency as well. And that's what this discussion in September is going to be. You want to, where do we want to go? What's our timing? What do we want to focus on? And how does that work with the moratorium? So I think to answer that question bluntly is we're going to try to figure out the balance there.
Okay. I mean, I was honestly, I didn't bring it up because I wanted to hear what TJ had to say first, but my update would be, we didn't know there was going to be a moratorium at the planning commission level prior to this meeting. Well, not prior to this formal meeting. At our last meeting, it hadn't happened. Moratorium. So,
okay.
And I do think my take was that we were going to have to be prepared to put in quite a bit of time and energy on helping staff go through this process, and that to me, I was thinking that it would very likely involve a special meeting almost every month. As hard as that is to fit into my schedule.
Is that what you're thinking, TJ?
I think it really depends on that scoping meeting.
Okay.
So now we're looking at a special meeting for September. When are you guys thinking that would be?
I think it'd be helpful to, well, I want to just say, I recognize that it's tough getting a packet on a Friday afternoon and then having a planning commission meeting on Tuesday. Read through, sometimes 200 or 300 pages.
It is a little hard.
It's also hard to put it together.
But if ever it's ready before, it'd be great to get a heads up. I'm guessing it's not.
We do our best to get it
Yeah.
out in advance, of course, but I guess where I'm going with this is, I think it'd be tough to, I'm not quite sure what materials and what we're gonna have for that scoping work session. But definitely wanna make sure you all have enough time to review everything, get your thoughts together before we have the meeting. So I want to throw that out there too, and we back into it that way, but.
Well, I think it comes back to you guys. When would you have it ready for us to look at?
Let me see.
I mean, and you can reach out, but it's just easiest when you've got everybody here.
No, that's exactly what we wanted to talk about.
Do I still have my Zoom people with us?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So let's see here.
My eyes hurt.
It's,
They do. And my dog went home. I think somebody left something there on the
Starting to
floor.
sound like a country western song.
My eyes hurt. My dog left me.
I would think that we could easily get something to you all by the 16th. So that's what, 2.5 weeks.
And let me ask the commissioners, do you prefer that we're back to back 2 weeks in a row, or do you like a break between? Does it matter to anyone? I don't care.
Well, I'm gone from the 9th to the 9th of September till the 11th of October.
You can give me your proxy, Bill, and I'll vote twice.
Okay, you're on.
Thomas and Jennifer, do you have a preference?
Well, I'll be gone September 9th through the 22nd. So I'll be back after the 22nd, and I'm okay with having the meeting whenever after that.
Are you able to do it on Zoom while you're gone?
No, I'll be out of service.
Okay.
I'll throw this out. And it's all kind of like a understanding, right? It's a yin and yang thing. We could do it sooner, we'll just have less information, if we will. But we can certainly pull it together. We should have a solid understanding by the end of this week, beginning of next. So I guess I'm wondering if it looks like a few people are out on the 9th.
The other thing is we'd still have a quorum, so we could still move forward. And this is just the preliminary part. So it's not as if they're really going to miss out on the process. So I think it's when you can have the most of it ready, is my opinion. Other people can weigh in. When you can have the most of it ready that is appropriate to have the meeting. And like I said, I don't think Bill or Jennifer or the other Jennifer is going to miss the process. It's just going to be us saying, yeah, I mean, I think in most cases, we're pretty much in agreement. I don't think anyone's gonna be like, oh no, this other thing's super, super important.
Yeah.
So what works for you? I'm okay with the 16th.
Well, the 16th is when you have the materials ready to go.
Oh,
yeah,
got it. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah. Now, again, I mean, if we wanted to have a meeting on the 16th, I can't do that. I'm out of state. But
Sorry, go ahead.
so that would put, we're gonna stick with a Tuesday. And we're already on the 27th. So basically,
It doesn't have to be on a Tuesday. It could be on any day of the week. Friday would be kind of.
Friday, we could have beer and stuff.
I'm not doing Friday.
I'd suggest somewhere between the 21st and 22nd or after the 16th. I'll be tied up until the 26th.
Both of those days work for me.
So if we got the materials out on the 16th and did it on the 22nd, at the meeting on Thursday, the 22nd.
Jennifer, that would work for you, right?
You said Thursday, the 22nd?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So be it. I'm gonna have a hard time remembering planning on a Thursday, but I'm gonna try.
You could do it.
Thomas, does that work for you, the 22nd?
Yeah, I think that's fine, I guess.
You're looking forward to it?
Can you tell in my voice?
Yeah. So we're going with 5:30 here?
Yep.
And approximately, what do you think? 3 hours more?
I think, hope it's not gonna take that long, generally 2, but.
2 would be nice.
Maybe we could do. Can we do it earlier?
I think we need to, I think, I was even gonna say some people might rather do 6 as a starting time, but 5:30 works for me, 5:30, 7:30.
So 5:30 work for people?
Yep. And I'm not keeping up on what other, is Bill still gone?
Yeah. Okay, 5:30 on,
5:30, 7:30 on the 22nd.
We have it. And just to prep everyone, the objective is to discuss scope and timeline, not get into the weeds on things. I know these tend to have that.
It'd be hard to pull.
I'm okay with that.
So just so you know, I do run a tight ship.
I'll back you up. Good.
When that comes in place.
Good. That's how you get things done.
But, yeah. All right, well, based on Bill's long yawn, I think it's that time.
I'm going to adjourn the meeting barring any objections.
All right. No objection.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
Thank
meeting.
you.
Yep.